Hey folks, welcome to RSMP Tabletop. I'm Jin, and today I'd like to introduce a special guest, Shane York, who has been helping us tremendously with our New England tournament scene. He's also one of our local tournament organizers as well. And I would like to introduce him today because we're going to go through a very hefty topic today. And Shane, would you like to introduce yourself and today's topic?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jin. Today we are going to be talking about Apocalypse. When Apocalypse was first announced, I thought he was a really cool character. I'm not as much of an X-Men comics reader as I was back in the 90s and 80s. So I don't know the character all that well, but the amount of information overload that AMG dumped on us made me really interested. So I went through a little bit of a journey. I started sharing that with you and Eric, and we thought it would be a great idea for a video to share that journey with everybody else.
Exciting. Yeah, no, this is definitely a very large topic. I haven't seen the amount of information that, like you said, AMG has ever given to us. So there's a lot to dive into. A lot of characters, a lot of new abilities, and maybe a new way to sort of like look at the game and play the game, right?
Absolutely. The list creation and the turn zero for this character and for the Servants of Apocalypse affiliation is going to be massive.
Love it. So would you like to start? Like, what would you like to talk about first today?
Sure. So let's talk about Apocalypse himself. When we first look at his card, I always like to start in the upper left corner and take a look at their basic abilities. So he's a 6 threat character, which is a pretty competitive threat level, I think.
I would agree, yes. We recently just had new Thor, Hero of Midgard, who's been tearing up stuff. And we're already getting another 6 threat character, right, in Apocalypse, which is very exciting.
And there are some other good 6 threat characters out there. Your Magnetos, your Thanos. Well, Thanos 6.
Technically, but
But Apocalypse himself, he's got 7 hit points on his front side. And he's sitting at a 4/4/4 for defensive stats. He is size 4, which means he's going to be a little bit of a ping pong ball for your opponent.
And what size base is he on?
So he's on a 65 millimeter base with the medium movement. Ooh. This is insane. He's going to be moving, I think it's 7.5 inches every time he takes a movement action.
Yeah, no, he's definitely going to be trucking along the board like very, very quickly. And given the size that he is, he's going to be very scary, I think.
So he's going to be competing with the place abilities that we'll get to in a little bit with guys like Dormammu for how much he can just adjust his position on the board. Let's start talking about his attacks. What do you think about his attack suite?
Oh, okay. So this is one of those incredible attacks where, like, not only do you start off with a decent range, it's a range 3 attack, 7 dice pool to start with. It's a builder, so it'll scale with the amount of damage you deal for as far as energy generation goes. But the key thing is you also get to choose your attack type beforehand.
That is so great. I can't tell you the number of times that I've been attacking your Miles Morales specifically and wondered, why do I not have more Mystic attackers? Yep. So the ability to change that on the fly is going to be great.
Yeah, it's just immediately a great utility kit as far as it's like, hey, you need to choose the defense that will be most advantageous to you. Either they'll have the least amount of rerolls or a defense deck where they won't be able to count blanks versus certain abilities. It's a great start to the attack. On top of that, it's got a very interesting condition game as well, if you roll wild with Coward before me. So let me understand this correctly, Shane. So if you roll a wild, you then get to choose to either give him the shock or the root special condition. Now, if the character already has the shock or the root condition before you declare the attack against them, instead, this wild will convert from a status condition giving ability to a straight up throw away any size. Is that correct?
Absolutely. In addition to that, we'll get to some of the other abilities on his card, but if they've got the shock or root, you're going to be doing extra on top of that with the abilities we'll see later. But this throw is not sized. So if you have a large model that is able to gain both the shock and the root condition, then you will be able to throw anybody in the game.
That's incredible. So your Sentinels, your Dormammus, like no one's safe from this throw.
Nobody is safe from this throw. unless they're immune to shock or root. And, the wild is going to be pretty easy to get on a 7-die attack where he has ways to potentially add dice or re-roll dice.
Ooh, yeah, that'll be great. Yeah, any sort of dice fixing is definitely going to make this even scarier at the end of the day.
Now, I don't know how many characters are already going to be alive after the attack when he's done 7 dice, and they already have the shock and root special condition on them from other characters going into them. So it'll be interesting to see how often this actually matters, because he might just kill the character before.
Right. But that may make him a premier sort of, he can probably hit the other Titans, right, of this game. So, maybe he feels pretty good punching a Hulk sometimes because, we're going to give him some really relevant conditions. And we also could potentially throw him and bowling ball right into his team, as you talked about.
Absolutely. So his second attack, his spender is 3 cost, and he can add 2 dice for each special condition that the character has. Is only range 2, so he's going to need to be up front. I feel like he's going to be a mid-range brawler more than likely, so sometimes he'll be in range 2, sometimes he'll have to get there. But 1 condition, 3 cost, adding 3 dice to the attack, marginal gain. Right, because his builder is already 7 dice. So that to me is a marginal gain. Once he has 2 or more conditions on that character, this is going to be an awesome attack. This is going to be that Titan killer that is going to bring down your Hulks at 20 hit points or your Thanos who's 8 hit points and reducing by 1 and something like that.
Right, so even just on his own, looks like he can apply just 2 conditions on his own. And so you're going to be starting with 12 dice, right? If you just get the root and shock just from his kit alone. And that's not to say there are people that maybe help him get more conditions.
Yeah, a little preview for later. A lot of the models that are inside of his affiliation have weird ways to give conditions out and have interesting triggers on their attacks. So there will be a bunch of conditions randomly floating around. So when the opportunity does present itself, it'll be an easy choice for Apocalypse, I think.
I think so too, yeah. So what do we like to move on to next?
So why don't we save his leadership for last and move to some of his superpowers? Because I think the leadership is a conversation all on its own.
Yeah.
So during the power phase, he's got this ability called Celestial Technology. And he can take 2 allied characters that are within range 5 of him. They drop all their objective tokens. Good call out, AMG. Thanks for, modifying the rules from where we were several years ago to making sure those objective tokens aren't moving around the field. But those characters are then placed within 1 of him. He's a 65 millimeter base. He's range 5 from him is another 10 inches, and then range 1 is another 1 inch, and their base size. For 4 power, teleporting 2 people to where they need to be during the power phase is massive.
Yes, agreed. There's a lot of different applications for this. Obviously, you can't, run away with objectives on this. But think about the other things. Either there's a strategic genius bubble that you need to set up. There could be bodyguards or taunters, in the form of, let's say, a Colossus or a Captain America or something like that. That could be set up if you get these characters now within range 1 of Apocalypse or within each other. There's a lot of applications for this. Anytime there's a big movement ability like this, I think can be very transformative to a game plan that you have, depending on the situation.
Absolutely, and on top of that, he's a 6-point leader, so you're already going to be playing a little bit taller than your opponent, unless your opponent is playing one of those really big lists. So the ability for him to reposition on an infinity formula or something like that and bring his guys with him is going to be huge. Get the beaters in the right place so that you're not going to fall behind on these split scenarios.
That's right. Oh, and so because of the timing too, this is an interesting thing I just realized. So the power phase is you get your power, you do player effects, and then you do the infinity, or sorry, the crisis effects that I meant to say.
You want to say infinity though,
but
right?
I do want to say infinity. You can use it to gain good positions on infinity formulas, right? Maybe they're out of position, but now they're within the infinity formula range to get their extra power. Or Demons Downtown, where you don't want someone to get the burning condition, maybe you can move them in a way that they don't get the burning condition, even though you scored that position last round, right?
Absolutely, and I think that is going to be one of the times where your game plan with Apocalypse is really going to show, and your practice with Apocalypse is going to really show when you're using your power to teleport people in and when you're just leaving them where they're at. I see this power being one of those once a game or once every other game type of powers. How often do you think he's going to use it?
I would think, yeah, it's going to be a once or twice per game thing. Mostly because, like, I think the power that he actually is going to generate is going to be probably used for his leadership ability, if you're taking him as a leader, or to set up the spenders and whatnot, or to help out with another superpower that can be very interesting as well, as far as status condition acceleration, right?
Yeah, so while we're talking about that, that's a good segue to go into one of his other superpowers, You Will Be Remade Through Me. So when an enemy character within 5, his 65 millimeter base, 5, that is just a huge circle, would gain a special condition that it already has, he can spend 1 power. The enemy character will then instead gain Bleed, Shock, Slower, Incinerate, his choice. He can only do that once a turn. The once a turn is a little bit sad, but being able to put out one of these conditions that is extremely detrimental, I would say these are some of the best conditions in the game that you're just going to be able to say, oh, well, A, that guy's immune to it. So I want to, instead of giving him something that they were immune to, give them something else. But also you could set up the shock for his builder or some other effect, right?
Yeah. So these are basically stat modifying like conditions, right? For the most, besides the bleed, which just does the damage. But yeah, you either reduce their dice for offense or defense, or you reduce their advance tool down to a slow, and that can drastically change the effectiveness of a model. I can't imagine how many times I have a long mover web warrior that gets slowed, and it is really painful, or you reduce their defense so they don't get their rerolls, or they reduce the effectiveness of their rerolls, I would say. So yeah,
absolutely.
That's already like a great ability, and I think it's going to make you really, encouraged to take more condition characters, right?
Yeah, and it always feels bad when you've got a character who's got a range to attack, where they're attacking twice and they've got a wild bleed, and they attack somebody, they get the bleed on them, they attack them again, they don't get the kill, but they got the bleed again, and you go, oh, I can't do anything. This solves that problem. It solves it in a really cool way. And I think this is an awesome superpower, and I would expect you're going to use this once a round.
Yes. And as we're talking about like what he doesn't want to use his power for, right? I think this will be one of the key things he's going to use his power for, as long as you're taking characters that will be able to hand out conditions, and that will also cycle back into a spender, right? That is counting the amount of conditions a character has to leverage more dice, right, against them.
Absolutely, and even as builder, because this can put out the shock condition, that is going to play into his builder getting that root and shock. So now if you can get, instead of applying a second bleed to a Hulk, get him the shock condition from a character that doesn't have the shock naturally on their card, so that when Apocalypse goes later in the turn and goes into that person, you'll already have the shock on there, you get the root, the second attack you get the throw. This is gonna like be a whole box of dominoes that he's just dumping on the floor.
Excellent. Yeah. No, it's really cool. I'm glad they put this on him and gives him that niche as the condition 6 threat so far, it seems like.
Absolutely. And I think conditions are an interesting place in the game. The value of the conditions is always variable depending on what you're playing against. So him being able to adjust which condition is going out is going to be really nice.
Yeah, gives you more agency, right, to call out what you think you're going to need, right, during this matchup.
Yep.
And that's always really cool.
So he's got a couple of always-on abilities. The first is his immunities. He's immune on the front side to bleed, incinerate, and stun, which are great. I wish Stagger was on that list as a 6th threat model. I don't want my 6th threat model getting staggered. So that's going to feel a little bit bad on the front side. But on the back side, he's got immunity special conditions.
It is pretty funny that he just brackets immunity special conditions, right?
Right. I mean, I think everybody's had a little bit of joke on that one, and we all kind of feel like they AMG did them right, especially now this also future-proofs in case other special conditions are going to come along.
Right, yeah. Should they ever introduce new conditions, yeah, this actually does future-proof.
It's always good to see some good future-proofing in technical writing.
I agree. But even the front side, just being immune to bleed, incinerate, and stun, like, it does make sure that his power generation is very consistent. He doesn't lose his defense, and he's not going to be, I guess, like, cut down by a bleed randomly, I think, which is always nice.
So the other always-on superpower that he's got is only the strong remain. So to me, they've gone through a whole bunch of different damage mitigation abilities in the past. Some of them have worked better than others. Some of them, were maybe a little bit too good. Some of them maybe were not making the cut. So I think this is a very good shift in the game design direction that AMG is going through. So after an attack against this character is resolved, so not throws, not any other sort of ping damage that's going on around the table, not Rogue blowing up his power, anything like that. After an attack is resolved, if he suffered damage from the attack, he removes 1 damage from himself. Importantly, if he is dazed, he doesn't get to do that. Additionally, once per turn, when he would gain a special condition that he's immune to, he can gain a power or remove a damage.
Oh, okay. So doubling down on that he is the condition king, right? If he himself would be subject to a condition that either he's immune to, right? Then he will also like be able to leverage that either to more power or just removing damage, which is great. I do agree, actually, that, AMG is definitely very forward-thinking on the design. We've had Thanos, who's been around for a long time, and that reduction in damage has been the cause of a lot of rough moments for some characters. And now we have a version of this that's like kind of almost the same effect as long as Apocalypse is able to survive the attack, right? So he's still vulnerable to being focus fire down if you are able to concentrate enough firepower into him, like with a Helios laser or something like that. But as long as you're just putting a bunch of small attacks on him, he'll probably be like, get health back each time.
Right, and with the 7 health, he's going to be able to stick around against most attacks to gain that 1 back. Throws are something that he is going to be very vulnerable to. So, once we get into the tactics cards that he's going to want, I really think Brace is going to be something he's going to look at because that's a vulnerability for this huge guy that you've got inside of your list. Other ways to do damage are going to be something he's vulnerable to. But let's look at that second sentence now. Once per turn, when he gains something he'd be immune to, he's going to either gain a power or remove a damage. So now, if you read most triggers, most of the wild triggers that apply a status condition, most of those are not optional.
Oh, okay.
Most of those are not, you may give a bleed. It's the target character gains bleed. So we are going to see, I think, him removing 2 damage against a lot of attacks, especially when he's on his backside, if he lives, which is kind of crazy, I think, right?
That is true, yeah. So when you're going against Apocalypse now, you really have to really consider it. It's like, hey, if I'm running, let's say, Ultron, and I'm attacking Apocalypse on his backside, suddenly my trigger that applies 2 conditions now can possibly just heal him back.
Right.
Right afterwards.
Or fuel him up for power if he hasn't gone and he wants to go next. Another interesting application of this would be somebody like Hood or an Arnim Zola who could give him bleed during your turns, which he is immune to. So then, Hood heals him. He can either heal for 4 or heal for 3 and gain a power. That's kind of amazing.
That is, yeah. Ooh, I hadn't considered the Hood tech as well, yeah. Because that bleed tech, the bleed debuff is always the thing that makes you kind of wary of running Hood's his healing. So we now have a character that just benefits. It's all upsides for Apocalypse.
It is 100% upsides. So I think those are really cool on his card, and that gets us through the special abilities. So now let's spend some time talking about this leadership.
Yeah, this is the meats and potatoes, I think, and it's so incredible to see how like large of a scope transformation that's going to change the game and how we can make lists in this. And I'm really excited for you to talk about it. So how do you want to kick this off?
Yeah, I mean, I first want to kick it off by thanking AMG. This, for me, the amount of mental tax that this leadership adds is something that I really enjoy in gaming. And I just think they have done a phenomenal job in setting this up in a way that is approachable, but also massive. You are going to play 30, 40, 50 games with this Servants of Apocalypse affiliation and still have just hit like the minimum for understanding it, I think. So Apocalypse is Horseman, which is the Servants of Apocalypse leadership that we have now. There could be one in the future. When you choose that leadership, he gets the Master of the Horseman card. Then he can assign Death, Famine, Pestilence, and War to eligible Servants of the Apocalypse characters. No character gets more than one of those cards. That doesn't tell us anything, right?
Not initially, just that it's like you're going to give them some sort of tag or something, right? Like you're going to assign things to the people.
Yeah. To me, it reads, this leadership is so complex and there is so cool. We needed a whole bunch of tarot cards in order to tell you what it does. That's what it reads to me.
We love sleeving more cards so we can put our characters. Okay, yeah, so we want to talk about Master of the Horseman?
Yeah, absolutely. So Master of the Horseman has a whole lot of text on it. Instead of just reading the text, which I think is a little bit boring, let's give a recap. So once per turn, Apocalypse can use an active power off of a Horseman card.
Okay.
Cool. Tells us the Horseman cards are going to have powers, and that he can use one of those active superpowers once per turn.
Yeah, can't confirm.
So then when Apocalypse is KO'd, the card goes away.
That tracks with all other leaderships, right? Usually
Yeah.
the leader is not there, the leadership will go away.
Which is cool. This card gains a evolution token once per turn during the power phase and can have a maximum of 6 tokens.
Ooh, so we're already seeing a alternative resource now being
Right.
introduced with this leadership.
So these tokens can be used in 2 different ways. Up to 3 of them may be spent to reroll dice for an active Horseman once per turn. Pretty good.
Yeah, so this
Right?
could be used on offensive rolls, defensive rolls, dodge rolls, I believe, right?
Yep.
As well. So
Yep.
that's great.
The once per turn restriction is a little sad, but I understand. We don't want somebody re-rolling 6 dice in one activation. That would probably be a little bit too powerful.
Yes, if you can find some way, I guess, to hypothetically get as many tokens as you want. I mean, it's capped at 6, but yeah, being able to reroll, let's say, 6 dice in one turn might put someone really over the edge, right?
Right, and a little bit of future sight here. There may be ways to add tokens to these cards, during the game round, other than just from this Horseman card. So it's going to be interesting, and that's some good proofing there. And the active Horseman may also spend these tokens as if they were power on the powers that are on the Horseman cards.
Oh, okay. As you said, they're previewing the fact that there's going to be active superpowers now
Right.
on the Horseman cards.
Let's get to these Horseman cards. So there are 4 Horsemen: War, Pestilence, Famine, and Death. Why don't we take them one at a time and go through each one of these cards to take a look at how Apocalypse can apply this power, and let's discuss how many evolution tokens that these cards are going to give us. How about that?
Sounds good. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure if we've mentioned this already, but Apocalypse does, Master of the Horseman card does allow him to use one of these superpowers on one of the Horseman cards once per turn, I believe, right?
Right. So we want to look at and evaluate how important is this power for Apocalypse, but also once we get into the individual characters, how important is this Horseman power going to be for that character as well? So we want a good relationship where the Horseman himself is going to be able to benefit as well as Apocalypse benefiting.
Agreed, yes. So we have to look at it in both contexts of, the Horseman and also the leader and how much they're going to benefit from this boon, right?
Right.
Yes.
So each one of the Horseman cards has 2 powers on it. The first is always an active superpower, and then the second is the way that they are going to gain evolution tokens towards the Apocalypse leadership, which again, remember, are capped at 6.
Right.
So why don't we start with War?
Sure.
We all like beating stuff up, right? That's why we came here to roll dice and beat people up.
War is so fun on paper. Would you like to go through what War does?
Sure. So the active ability is Fury, which during the next attack that character makes that turn. So you have to spend the power before they make the attack. If the target character is within range 2, this character may change 1 die result to a hit for each crit and wild in the attack roll.
Oh, okay. So this is very much like Warrior of Legend, I think, off of Valkyrie, right?
Absolutely. And we all know that ability is awful and nobody uses it, right?
Or it's one of the premier abilities of Valkyrie's card. Your mouse may vary, but I think on paper, pretty good, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially so Apocalypse himself, his spender is range 2. We are now rolling 10, 12, 14, 16 dice. I think there are 10 conditions in the game, so he's rolling 18 dice, potentially.
Yeah, we're well into the double digits at this point, and I don't think much will survive, a fully powered up El Sabanor's Judgment and a Fury, both on top of that.
Yeah, so it's going to be really interesting. Obviously, the more dice you roll, the better it's going to be. In addition, we know that the evolution tokens that are on the card can give you rerolls, so you can balance off with some good information after you see what you've rolled to add in a couple of rerolls because, say you have 3 or 4 dice left over that are not already changing, but 2 that are changing. You can add in a couple evolution tokens and look at like your opponent's defense roll and see where you need to get to.
Right, yeah. So you can definitely like take a look at all your different layers of rerolls, then decide it's like, well, okay, how much more do I want to try to fish for these and then get the wilds or the crits that will let me change even more dice. So yeah, a lot of control there.
Right. For me, on your standard 5-die builder, this is probably not going to be a great superpower. So any of the Horsemen that just have like a 5-die builder, they might want to save it for their spender or some other use. Re-rolling your dice on a 5-die builder is going to be just as economical as this power. But you get to see the information of the rolls beforehand. If Miles Morales came in and rolled 3 blocks and I've only got 1 hit, then it doesn't really matter, right? I'm not going to spend that power. I'm not going to spend those evolution tokens because we really need to look at these superpowers. Unless you just have a glut of power, what is their value in evolution tokens versus what is their value, or what is the evolution token value in the reroll?
Right, yeah. And this I think will be especially important if, let's say, you're fishing for a trigger, like on like a spender or something.
Right.
So if you need like a hit like to show up like in the results, that value sort of goes up on this particular power, I think.
Yeah, and while average damage is not a great benchmark, it's one of the benchmarks we have. So if Apocalypse is making a 12-die attack against a 4 defense model, that's going to be your standard hefty person that he's going to want to use a 12-die attack against, right? He's probably not going to want to use a 12-die attack against Honey Badger. So, when he's using that big attack, his average damage will go from 5 to 8 using this Fury superpower. So that kind of gives you the benchmark of where your dice pool really needs to be in order to get the result that you're looking for.
Right. So maybe you don't need it for a 3-threat, but for a 4-threat, like this probably like pays out pretty well, I think, math-wise.
Right. The difference between 5 damage and 8 damage against most of your 4 threats is the difference between them still living or them dying.
Yeah, we never want to leave a character on 1, right? Otherwise, terrible things will happen.
There's always going to be the MCP special on this, though, where, Apocalypse has a character he's attacking who has, 10 conditions on them, and he uses this Fury superpower and does his spender and does no damage.
Yeah,
right?
it can happen, yeah. But at that point, it's like, that's out of your control, right? Like, you've prepped it as best you can. He just needs to hit.
Yeah. So the first time each turn that the Horseman of War takes damage or does damage, you put an evolution token on the Master or Horseman card.
Ah, okay. So that's 2 evolution tokens, or you can get per turn.
Once per turn. Oh, yeah. So if you had somebody who was both taking damage and putting out damage on either their turn or the opponent's turn. So if you have somebody with a clapback or something like that, yes.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about, like, let's say I'm attacking Daredevil, right? And I happen to do a damage to him, but then he goes and, counter hits me back for a damage.
Right.
So you would get 2 evolution tokens in that case.
Absolutely.
Right? Yes.
Absolutely. And these evolution tokens on War are gained after the effect is resolved. So you're gaining those immediately. So you can almost pay back sometimes your rerolls just by getting that damage on there, which is pretty interesting. I think War is going to generate a lot of tokens.
I would agree, yes. I think this is, if from just my first impressions of looking at all the different Horseman cards, which we will preview, I think this has the most out of activation generation potential, and also it's going to be the most consistent way for you to get evolution tokens, since you're always attacking, you're always taking damage in this game, right?
Absolutely. So I think this is going to work really well on characters who want to be up in the fight, who are both going to be taking damage and putting damage out. I think that's going to be important.
Agreed.
And again, the power for Apocalypse, I would say, is almost the best baseline of power for Apocalypse. It's going to do some stuff every once in a while. Probably not great on a 5-die or 7-die attack, but if you have a glut of power, it's a good way to just spend power. So the second Horseman card that we're going to talk about is Pestilence. Pestilence has a pretty unique active power where it's got 2 bullet points on it. And, that is not something that we normally see, but we've been seeing a little bit more. You and Eric talked about Shang-Chi recently, who has a bullet point like that as well, I believe.
Yep, and we also have just talked about Namor as well, who has the 3 different modes for his spender as well.
Right. So this is a cool design decision because it really, to me, is cleaning up what is happening and giving you a real well thought out structure for understanding the superpowers. And I just wanted to call that out because I think, again, AMG has put a lot of thought into this faction, and these types of decisions are really helping everybody in the community understand what's going on. So Consuming Blight is a 2-cost active superpower. For each enemy character within 2, choose one of the following effects, and these are the bullet pointed effects. If the character has poison, root, or slow, it suffers a damage, or the character gains poison, root, or slow. You can only use this superpower once a turn. Sad times, because I'm pretty sure you would love to span this.
Oh, just pulse out the condition, then pulse out the damage again?
Pulse out, pulse out, pulse out, or pulse out, move, pulse out, move, pulse out, right? Like, if you happen to have 6 power or 6 evolution tokens. So this is another way we can apply root. We know Apocalypse loves root for his builder. That's going to be a really good synergy with Apocalypse. Root, to me, is one of the most detrimental conditions you can put on some of the most scary models that are currently in the meta.
I would agree. We can talk about Beta Ray Bill, how he was so ubiquitous for a long, and one of the best ways to deal with him at the time was to tax his power. So every time he wants to reduce damage, costs him 2 power. His throws are now cost 4. So that drastically hampered his ability to do much in the game, right?
Absolutely, and we can look at some other big characters in the meta. So Thanos.
Yes.
Thanos is using how many superpowers a turn?
Oh man, I would say Mind Space Stone. You're looking at like what, 3?
3 minimum.
Yeah,
right?
and on his ally's turn, he's using another one as well because Death's Decree. Right.
So, when we start talking per round, because he's going to be Death's Decreeing a couple of different people, this could be 5 or 6 power on a Thanos.
Agreed.
Crimson Dynamo.
Oh man, yeah.
You're looking at Loki, Prince of Lies. I have seen Loki, Prince of Lies everywhere recently. Him having to pay 2 power instead of 1 power to make you suffer the damage for his skull is a huge difference, right?
Agreed.
So I think that root condition is going to be important in the current meta as well as for Apocalypse himself. What drops it down in usefulness for me is the range 2.
Right.
Because we're going to combine that with some of the characters that are Pestilence. Are they really going to want to be up front? And we'll get to those characters a little bit later. I don't think it's going to be a great way to spend evolution tokens. I think your rerolls are going to be a little bit more important than this unless you really need to apply that root to a big character.
Right. It's good to have it on the stick though. Like maybe sometimes the job is to just take an advance, apply a condition, and then move on to another like location, right?
And if Apocalypse does have the power and he's within 2 of somebody, this can give him a extra 2 dice on his spender, right?
Ooh, yes, agreed. Yes.
So he can spend the 2 power, apply the condition that they don't have, and then do his spender, and that adds 2 dice. So the second part of the Horseman of Pestilence, at the end of this character's activation, it gains 1 evolution token for each enemy character that gained 1 or more special conditions. So while this is synergistic with the first part of it, it's going to be difficult to apply multiple conditions to multiple people.
Right. But it does make me very excited to see who can be run as the Pestilence Horseman and see if they can naturally apply conditions, especially from a distance beyond range 2. And that's going to make it very interesting to generate those evolution tokens, right?
I think that's going to be very important in choosing your Pestilence is will they be able to add those conditions themselves or not? And how reliable are they going to add those conditions? So adding a condition on a wild on a 5-die attack is not that great.
Right. Especially if you need like a couple die facings, right, to get it.
Right. And then, if we're spending the evolution tokens on getting those die faces so we can go backwards and, gain some of these tokens, it's going to be weird. The nice part is, though, consuming Blight is free basically for you if there are 2 people around you.
Right, just sort of refunds itself, right?
Right. So if you made the attacks or however else you were going to apply the conditions and didn't get the conditions on people, you can just use this if there are 2 people around you to just refund itself and hand out a couple of conditions, which is neat. So the next Horseman that we're going to look at is Famine. Famine has a Vanish to Dust, active ability, 2 power. Choose up to 1 enemy character within range 2. The enemy character loses 1 power.
Good start.
Fine. Spending 2 power to get somebody to lose 1. Not awesome, but depending on the character, could be debilitating, right?
Right. Sometimes the 1 power is the threshold they need, right? There's a lot of characters that have great abilities that start on 2 power. So maybe you can turn up an important bodyguard, for instance,
Right.
and that could be just the complete change that you need, right, to make an activation worthwhile.
Right, and against your lovely spider warriors, taking away 1 power to go from 2 to 1 can have a drastic effect on almost all of them, right?
Yeah, it turns off the web line, the web swing. It could be the difference of letting me do a throw or not. A lot of things, yeah. No,
Right. So the second half of this power, though, is where I think the money is, and this is where I think Apocalypse himself is going to want this character stapled to him every game.
Oh, yes. What is the next ability?
Place this character within 2 of its current location. This is not predicated on the first portion happen. This is just take your 65 millimeter base Apocalypse, place him within range 2. We've seen it on Dormammu. It's awesome. It stops all of the control or some of the control that your opponent was using to get you out of the way, brings you back into the fight. We talked about his ability to relocate his partners onto him at the beginning of the turn. So if he's going as your late piece, he can help use this to get into position without using actions. Windmill Slam, staple, he wants a Famine every game.
This is a strictly better Gamma Leap on the same base size model.
Right. It's only 2 cost, which, is, and you can spend the evolution tokens on it if you need to. So, and I don't think we talked about in the evolution tokens, but I believe you can use 1 evolution token and 1 power if you needed to. It doesn't need to be, you don't need to have the full amount of power like you would for Red Skull 3's ability, because it says you can just spend the evolution tokens as if they were power on your card.
Oh, that's a great call out, because I was wondering if you could actually split up the usage of the evolution tokens and your normal power to fund these superpowers.
So as far as it reads, what I see, again, this video is being shot before he's released, so we haven't seen anything come out on the rules forum yet. I'm sure that question has already been asked 7, 8, 2 dozen times.
Probably a few times, yeah.
But I think as far as it reads to me, that's how that works. And it's going to be interesting. Apocalypse, turn 1, 65 millimeter base, starting at the front of this line, moves range 2 forward. He's attacking well past the center line with his range 3 attack. You don't want to have a character who's going to walk up and pick up a center line extract if Apocalypse is around.
Agreed. Oof, yeah.
So to me, this just fixes so many things about his card. He doesn't have any personal action compression. We didn't talk about that, but the 6 threats are really weird. Some of them have action compression, some of them don't. He doesn't on his card, and I think that's strictly because Famine exists, and they didn't want to give him 2 ways to get action compression.
Right, and this is interesting because we're moving to this direction where okay, Hulk is just great on his own, right? He can just move himself around, so he gets played in affiliation, but also splashed everywhere because he's so mobile. This one really wants to drive home the fact that it's hey, Apocalypse is really awesome in his own affiliation, because look at that. He gets a range 2 place as a 65 millimeter base model, and also I guess whoever is under Famine, maybe they don't have a range 2 place as well, and that could really change up what they can do, right? On top of the power loss that they can give an opponent.
To see where our Famine is going to go, because you want this, right?
Yes, I think personally, for me at first reading, I would always want to include at least a Famine Horseman, strictly just to make sure that Apocalypse gets to where he needs to go, right, and do the job he needs to do.
So to balance that out, because it's such a Windmill Slam card already, the Horsemen of Famine power at the end of that character's activation, so only at the end of their activation, not during the opponent's turn or anything, if no non-dazed enemy characters are within 3, gain an evolution token. Whoever is your Famine is going to want to not be up in the mix. You are not going to want to put this on a range 2 attacker who needs to be up front. You are going to want to put this on somebody who's going to be on your back line. And you're only gaining 1 evolution token ever in a round.
Yeah, this is a really great balancing. So whereas the other ones can generate, more than 1 token over the course of a round, this is strictly a very specific timing, and you're only going to get 1. This does make it interesting. So I think if the math works out correctly, if you just get within range 2 of a model, do what you got to do, and then you decide to vanish to dust. So if you're just within range 2 of them and you place 2 back, you're now outside of 3, I believe.
Correct. So if you're in range 2, that's 3 inches. Mm-hmm. You get a range 2 place, that's another 3 inches. and your range 3 is 6 inches long. So you're going to be more than your base size out. In fact, you won't have to jump all the way away.
Right.
But that is going to force your Famine to not be on the point where that other person is.
Right. So if you want to really get that evolution token, like you really have to be very deliberate of like where you want this model to be, right? At the end of their activation.
Right. Or that model is going to have their own action compression to jump in and out.
Right. Yeah. So we'll see.
Little preview. We'll talk about that one in a little bit.
Yeah. There may be a couple that can do that.
And death. So death to me is one of the most interesting. First, the active ability costs 3, created to end. It's the only one of the Horseman abilities that costs 3. All the other 3 cost 2. During the next attack, so again, this needs to be done before the attack is declared. Add 1 die to the attack for each damage on the target character up to 3.
Oh, okay. And this can only be used once per turn, right?
Can only be used once per turn.
Okay. So this harkens back to Sabertooth, right? I believe his No Mercy special ability, it reads very similar to this.
It's going to be interesting. You can add up to 3 dice. If you're adding less than 3 dice, I don't think it's worth spending the Horseman tokens on unless you absolutely positively need somebody dead. Yes, adding a die to the attack is slightly better than re-rolling a die, but once you get to that 3 power to add 2 dice, I don't think you want this one. So if you're spending evolution tokens, you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing in how you're spending the evolution tokens versus the power. That management to me is going to be a big deal on the death ability.
Correct. Yeah, it is definitely the most expensive one and the one I'm probably the most wary of using because like 3 power is a lot, and that usually turns off a character's like main superpower, whatever that is normally, right? Versus like using this ability.
Absolutely, and you're going to also have to judge versus the spender of that character. So most of the characters, your spenders, are in the 2 to 3 power range, sometimes 4. So you're really going to have to judge, what the other abilities on that spender are and where your power expenditure goes. It's possible that doing both things can get you that really big hit and take out the really large targets. But I think unless you have an overall glut of power, that this one's fine.
It's fine, yeah. I think obviously if a character already has 3 damage on him, it feels pretty good. I think like 1 die per dice. I think that usually is pretty enticing.
And especially if you're spending power and not evolution tokens, so you have the evolution tokens left over afterwards to do some rerolls on those extra dice that you're adding. The more dice you roll, the more valuable those rerolls become.
Agreed, yes.
So to me, that is going to be like the benchmark of where you're going to go with this. The Horseman of Death power itself, once per turn, when this character is dazed or KO'd, or when this character dazes or KOs an enemy character, gain 3 evolution tokens. So if we look at Famine is maximum getting you 6 tokens a game.
Right, correct.
If your death character dazes and KOs, they're getting you 6. Mm-hmm. So if you just have somebody who dies, they get you 6.
Yep.
So the amount of evolution tokens you have is similar to Famine. One of the reasons that it's weird is your opponent has a little bit of agency in when you're gaining these tokens.
Yes.
If you're using them defensively, if you're putting death on a character who you're planning on having die, this is a little bit of agency in your opponent's court. On the flip side, if the character is so valuable to your game plan that if they don't die, you win the game, then this is just a freebie for you, right?
Yeah. And the other thing is that if there's a way for you to sort of sometimes you might want to find a way to redirect attacks into the death Horseman as well.
Absolutely.
And that could be a way for you to sort of like take a little bit of agency back, right? And I think there's a couple ways we can end up doing that as well.
Yeah, when we get to the tactics card section, we're going to talk about some really cool ways to kill death. one of which is sacrifice, the other of which is special to this affiliation. But also, you may want to put this on guys who are going to kill other models.
Right.
You know, your beaters, you need them to be out causing death anyway. And if they're not causing death, you know, they're going to be falling behind. But this gives you a little bit of agency on that character to blow your evolution tokens, because if you do daze somebody, you're going to get 3 back.
Yeah. And that's a huge amount of evolution tokens, in my opinion.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you know, when we take a look at the cards themselves, and in a vacuum, we look at how important they are to Apocalypse, how important they are to the affiliation. I personally think Famine is going to be your number one. You're going to want a Famine every game, 100%. That is something you are not going to want to lax on.
Right. Anytime there's action compression, extra movement, which is so important in miniatures games, I feel like you never want to leave that on the table, right?
After that, I think the other 3 are pretty close to each other or closer to each other. I personally think the active power on Pestilence is more situational than the other 2 and is going to be the one that you're looking for the least. I think War and Death, you can work their evolution token gain into your game plan, so that, again, with Death, either you've got a character who you don't want to die, and if they don't die, you win the game, or a character who's out there killing people. And War has the highest ceiling in the ability to gain evolution tokens, right? So that, for me, is where they all stand. Do you agree? Do you have some counterpoint?
So I would say that if the focus is to do attacks against the enemy team, then I would say yes. Famine would be your first, and then yeah, War would be the next one, and then Death. And I think that's probably the order that you want to go with. And that is not to preclude that in the future, maybe there could be a build of Apocalypse that someone figures out that's like, hey, we're just going to debilitate your bunch of guys, you know, and try to outscore you and just like, you know, mess with you in that way. And, you know, this is ripe for experimentation, which is what I'm very excited about this particular leadership, right? You have 4 different Horseman cards. They all do something drastically different, and they can give characters abilities, that extra oomph sometimes to do something that they normally can't do, or improve the game plan that they already have. So I would say, yeah, Famine, War, Death, and then Pestilence is what I would agree with. But hey, I am always happy to be proven wrong if people out there in the audience finds a new focus that they want to do with Apocalypse and his Horsemen as well.
Yeah, and like I said, I think the second group of 3 is pretty close, and I would never be upset about having any of those abilities. Right, none of those abilities are going to make me upset that I get to, for free, add them to a character.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Having options is always better than not having options. I do think that managing your token generation, managing your Horseman activations to make sure they all get to activate when they need to. Death maybe doesn't need to activate, but managing who activates, when they activate, how many tokens you're going to have, and spending those tokens correctly is really what's going to set the Apocalypse players who do well apart from the Apocalypse players who don't do well.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes you can be in a situation where you run out of power, and in the same case with the evolution tokens, you could run out of evolution tokens to not be able to do the job that you need to do.
Absolutely. And as far as a power level in the game, if we look at Guardians of the Galaxy as one of the most powerful leaderships in the game. It's been proven in different leagues, different events to do very well. That leadership gives you 6 rerolls around. Those rerolls you have to assign before the turn starts.
Right, yeah.
This leadership, maybe you won't get 6, you get 1 for free. If your Horsemen all give you 1, then you get 5 rerolls around that you don't have to assign beforehand. In addition, you get these other abilities.
Right.
Now, it's a little bit of a weird comparison because Star-Lord is a 3-threat character, Apocalypse is a 6-threat character.
Yeah.
but you know, when we're evaluating this leadership, we're going to get 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 rerolls a turn, and we are getting these 4 extra abilities that add abilities to Apocalypse himself as well as the characters that we're going to take.
Right, and offensively, like for Death and War specifically, it's almost as if you're kind of adding rerolls to them because there is some sort of either additional dice or dice modification.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's going to be really interesting. So now that we've done that, we should probably take a look at the affiliation itself. I don't think I've seen an affiliation start with 17 characters in the affiliation list.
Well, Hellfire Club.
Sure, Jin.
No. But you're right. You're right.
Dark Dimension
Yes.
was before Hellfire Club.
I stand corrected. You're right. See, there's 2 examples right there. But you're right. As far as an actual list of characters, this is incredible, right?
Yeah. I mean, maybe A-Force was on the list. A-Force kind of took like a weird amount of the female characters and just threw them in a bucket and said, here you go. And I can't remember, the exact order of what stuff came out when. But, this is a massive list of characters. I look at this list of characters and immediately 6, 7, 8 of them jump out to me as characters who are just good, right? We see them on the table on a regular basis, and they are just good characters who would be fine in any affiliation.
I would agree. And even some of the characters that maybe even maligned, I think are seeing a slight resurgence after the rotation and everything, and people are trying these characters out again and finding it's like, oh yeah, Iceman's actually pretty good, for instance,
Yeah, I mean, him, Blob, Magic, I think, these are some characters that are underplayed that maybe as a community we look at things as too black and white and we don't look at the shades of gray. So I think with a Horseman ability added to their card that they might see some awesome stuff come about. I
would agree, yes. For some, they may even just double down on their kit as well, which is always a great thing to see too.
For sure. Beast having extra options is only going to make him an amazing 3-threat character, right? So why don't we go through each character one by one and talk a little bit about the characters and how they apply to the Apocalypse, the Servants of Apocalypse affiliation, what they're going to get from their Horseman cards, and what they're going to lend to Apocalypse himself.
Sure, yeah. Who would you like to start the discussion about?
Why don't we just do it in alphabetical order? I'm a structured guy.
Okay.
I like things going top down. So why don't we start? Do you want to start us off with Archangel?
Yeah. So let's talk about Archangel. So would you like to also, I guess in this case, should we discuss? He's a new character, right? Would you like to discuss him more in depth?
Yeah. I mean, I think in the future we'll probably do a deep dive on the Archangel box. Angel and Archangel are interesting characters. The community, from what I have seen, is really torn on how good they both are. So it's going to be really interesting when they come out to me. Some people are saying that they're awesome and overpowered, and some people are saying that, they belong in the dumpster fire. So it'll be really interesting to me to see what really happens.
So usually I feel like when the community does that, it probably means that they're just fine.
Right. And as we just talked about, a just fine character inside of the Apocalypse affiliation. Now, was Archangel created with this affiliation in mind? And those Horseman cards that were in development at the same time as Archangel, did that affect his design? Maybe.
We cannot see the peek behind the curtain, unfortunately, unless AMP tells us, so we can only conjecture at this point. But I personally do like Archangel. So at a high level, to me, as you can probably see the card on the screen, he is pretty fast because he's a flight medium mover on a medium base, so that's already pretty fast. He's got charge, so he's got action impression. He's got a range 3 attack, and that means that between that base, that movement, and range 3 attack, he's going to be able to reach out and touch like the opponents and like hit them for the potential for status conditions, which Apocalypse does like. He randomly gets a place too, so maybe that gets him onto an objective that he needs to go. So you imagine that like he can do a medium charge, medium base, range 3 attack, and then if you get the trigger to place that medium base within 1, like that's an incredible amount of movement that he can get.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And he can be Death and Pestilence. That mobility is going to come in really well for Pestilence. We talked about that range 2 ability. Only Toad can be both Death and Pestilence. I think that's actually a mark against Archangel because I personally believe Toad is one of the best characters in the affiliation. So he is fighting for a spot. Giving his spender 3 dice to put out that stagger or the activation token is where I think this guy is really going to shine.
Yes. So yeah, the Avatar of Death ability to give out that activation, right? Potentially can be huge as far as turning off a very key piece from going like when they need to that round.
Yeah, spending 6 power sometimes feels bad, but if I spend 6 power and remove a Hulk activation, that's going to be so good. Getting that to 10 dice with the evolution token rerolls makes that wild so common that I think he's going to have a really good place. I think he's going to have a good place. I think he is going to be the standard of the midline of the affiliation. He's not overpowered. He's not going to super shine inside of the affiliation, but he'll never be a bad choice either.
I would agree. And I also like to call out the Chosen of the Apocalypse ability that he has to be able to turn additional dice faces into hits for every wild he has. So the only other character that has that, I think, naturally is just Gamora, right? And Gamora is an excellent attrition piece as far as just getting to do a lot of damage on somebody. Now, if we do actually spend that 3 dice for, additional dice, the additional power for extra dice on the death ability, then that really starts to ratchet up that ceiling as far as damage goes, right?
He appears at first glance with his 5 health for a 4 threat character to be a little bit of a fragile glass cannon. His wing shield adding 2 dice to the defense or dodge roll, then the evolution tokens giving him the rerolls. This is going to make him more survivable in this affiliation than he normally is. We talked a little bit earlier about how the larger the dice pool, the better the rerolls are. And so this is going to do really well for Warren, I think.
Yeah, it's almost as if they designed them together at the same time.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe. Maybe. Seems like a good assumption.
Yeah.
So where would you like to go to next?
War of Alphabetical Order. So let's do Beast. Beast is an incredible workhorse model to my experience. So he's a medium move, medium base. He's got wall crawlers, so effectively the same as flight.
Right.
He just dives wherever he wants to go. Right. So like Archangel, he also has the ability to randomly place off of his builder as well.
Right.
So again, you can cover an incredible amount of ground sometimes. So he's a horseman of Pestilence and War. Okay. So right now, the thing that I always think about Beast is that he's a throw bot. He has a 2 power throw. He walks, he throws you off a point, he wins that point. So that's my baseline understanding of Beast, and that he also generates a ton of extra power because every time he rolls a skull, for any reason, he'll get an extra power as well. So usually he has a decent amount of power generation, whether or not he succeeds his attacks or not, and he's very good at displacing like small models. So how would you say he's improved by either Pestilence or War?
To me, Pestilence is a little bit of a head scratcher. He's only got 1 condition on his card. Really weird. It's automatic, so he doesn't need to, but it's on his spender, but he doesn't need to spend power to put it, he doesn't need to roll a wild or anything to get it. So he is going to need that extra power that he gets from the skulls in order to apply that condition in range 2. Now, his base attack is range 3. If you don't roll the ambush and you don't have anybody next to you, he's going to be a really sad guy. Like you said, he's already wants to spend 2 power a turn on throwing somebody off of a point. So now in order to get your evolution token every turn, he's got to have basically 4 power.
Right. Unless you want to play the game where like he gets in range of 2 people to just do a quick, pulse, right?
Right.
Get the just be a net 0 for evolution tokens, and then you can still throw afterwards.
Right, which is fine, but I don't think we want to be at net 0, right? I think we want to be better than that. Where I think Beast shines inside of the affiliation is nested rerolls. Nested rerolls are so good. Stars and Garters is an awesome ability. I've been using it ever since this guy came out. And I love him. When I played X-Men, this guy was a windmill slam into every list when I played X-Men. And I think he's going to do really well in the Apocalypse affiliation, because if you can Stars and Garters, get your results, take a look. Do I need more rerolls? Spend the evolution tokens. He can really build up to a level of consistency that nobody else can.
Right, and that 2 energy defense is very deceptive, right? Because you can reroll those dice, like he's much more resilient against most attacks than you would think. Like he's great.
I wouldn't doubt in this affiliation if you see him block 1 or 2 every time against energy attacks.
I would agree.
Between Stars and Garters and the evolution tokens. So I think this affiliation helps him out just even that much more. Also, you can use, if you don't want him to ambush, you can use your evolution tokens to get rid of that wild, right?
Oh, right.
Which sometimes that ambush for me has been a little bit of a detriment. So you can use that to get him out of trouble. Also, you can use the Fury superpower on the War card to change the wild that you have to a hit to remove the ambush. It's going to be an interesting play when it matters. It's going to matter, right?
Right. Wow. Okay. Yeah, I hadn't considered that, but yeah, that gives him a lot more agency as far as where he wants to ambush or not, and that's always been a source of anxiousness for any X-Men player when they're rolling for that important attack. It's like, right, I want to do damage, but I don't want to move. So yeah, this gives him a lot more control over that, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I think with the ambush and his ability to put it out there on a normal basis, kind of at will when he wants to, and the medium base, medium move, he's going to be a really good chaser inside of this faction.
Super agree. Yeah. Next one.
Cable.
Ooh.
Since Cable's glow up, we've seen him everywhere, right? He's just a really good character. He's a consistent character. The rerolls on the plasma rifle. He's never going to do 10 damage in a turn, but he is really good at doing 3 to 4 on an attack.
Well, I mean, sometimes you throw the size 4 terrain, it gets them to that 10 damage.
Sure. Yep. So he does have a terrain throw, which is cool. That adds a lot. Apocalypse himself without a throw on the card is a little sad for a 6-point character, so adding in a throw is really good. He can also be Pestilence and War. The Incinerate for him is, I don't know if I want to say automatic, but
it's
happens a lot.
It's likely, let's say.
Incinerate is a popular condition to be immune to, so that's going to make him a little bit sad. But his action compression with the body slide is going to get him into the positions that he needs. The range 5 attack will allow him to chase when he needs to. The Incinerate for Pestilence is great.
So both of these abilities, the Pestilence and the War, I believe he needs to be within 2, right, of the enemy to really just benefit from the either additional dice or the damage pulse or the status pulse, right?
Yeah, and I don't think he's going to use the Pestilence active ability. This guy has so much good stuff to spend his power on, including Telekinetic Shield to defensively add more dice, as we talked about. Adding more dice makes your rerolls more valuable. I don't think he's ever going to want to spend power doing the abilities. Cable is very good in your Gamma type situations because he can keep basically the whole enemy team within range 3 of him at all times. So in those situations, maybe he'll pulse out a Pestilence. But I'm thinking Pestilence, he's just going to get 1 to 2 conditions a turn and get you your evolution tokens. War, I don't see a time when this guy isn't going to put out a point of damage every turn.
Right.
I would say this particular character is probably the one out of everybody on the list that gets you a 1 guaranteed power return for war. Even when he's got to be on a different point in a different area, because he can walk, shoot range 5, hop backwards with body slide. It's not what you want to do with a 5-point character, but he'll be able to get you a token every turn if you need it.
Right, right. And do you think people are going to be attacking him a lot as a war?
I think with him as war and 11 points between 2 characters in your list, that he's going to have to be a target, right? If they don't kill Cable, who's within range 3, to get his rerolls, they're going to have a bad day.
Yes, agreed.
So I think he will take some damage. The telekinetic shield is going to be able to reduce that damage a little bit. So it'll be interesting. I think between the throw and the incinerate, which is going to be pretty close to automatic on him, that he's a great addition to this list.
And do you lean one way or the other for Pestilence or War at this point?
I think he's probably going to be one of the better Pestilence characters because he is a good character and that incinerate is pretty auto. The problem with that is he generally doesn't want to split attacks and put attacks into 2 different characters. And the incinerate is after the attack is resolved, so if he accidentally kills a character, you don't get the evolution token. Oh, I mean, am I really upset if he accidentally killed somebody? Probably not. However, that is a detriment, right? Because Cable does just randomly do 6-7 damage on his 5-die attack.
He absolutely does do that. So in that case, Evolution Token is more of a consolidation prize, which is, not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah. And I mean, I think War is good. Again, like you called out, the ability is range 2. He's not super into range 2. He doesn't really want to do his area attack. I mean, it's printed on his card. I have used it before, but I would say it's not something that he wants to put out more than once every 3 or 4 games.
No, I think it's a very situational ability. Typically, I think if he really needs the health back, that's when we use it, and less so much as a spread damage ability.
So I think that's kind of all we've got about Cable. I think he's going to be really good in the affiliation.
Absolutely. He's a solid 5-threat. He'll continue to be a solid 5-threat in this affiliation.
Speaking of 5 threats.
Oh, that's a great... I didn't even plan that.
Cassandra Nova.
Yeah.
So since she's been released, she's been a really polarizing model, right?
Yes.
So like the Archangel discussion, only now with practical experience, there are some people who love her. There are some people who put her in every list. There are some people who put her on the table a lot. Then there are people who have never played her before.
It's a very underrated kit, I will say. Like for the naysayers, I would say.
I've been playing this game for a long time. After our last tournament, I bought the Cassandra Nova Jean Grey box. Nice. in response to the Apocalypse affiliation. So I've always thought she was fine. But what she brings, unless you are doing specific things in the past, like the trap house lists and that kind of stuff, which I always felt were more gimmicky than they were good. She was fine. A 5-die Mystic Attacker at range 4 with sap power is never going to be bad. Add on top of that she's got a range 3, which advances the target character their speed for power, and you kind of start ramping her up a little bit.
Mind Possession is an incredible attack, and I do not understand why people don't take her just for this alone, because Charles has to actually do damage with his attack to get that to go, as far as making him do the advance. Mm-hmm. She just declares the attack, you resolve the attack, and you just move. That's it.
And it's sizeless.
Insane.
So unless the character is immune to being moved, you can just walk them away. Or closer.
Yeah.
Or closer. We will see. We saw a little bit earlier on this list that there are a bunch of characters with range 2 attacks. So, bringing an enemy character forward so that your beaters can beat on them is always going to be good.
And that also synergizes with the, I believe, the psychic distraction, right? Where she gets to, if you move somebody within range of her, she can then try to do some ping damage and move herself again, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about our Horseman, Famine, and Death.
Okay, yes.
So now Famine, we want to be away from people.
Yep.
So if people come up to her as Famine, she can blast them once, mind possession them, walk them away. She gets the Famine evolution token. It's basically free on her, right? Like it might as well functionally be free unless the model moved up to base with her. Right. And then, like you said, you add on to that the psychic distraction, and now we're going crazy. The biokinesis is going to be really interesting. The ability to apply root and slow is something Apocalypse wants to see.
He loves this, yes.
It is at range 3, which is a little anti-synergistic with Famine, but we'll see how that works out. Death is fine. She's going to be killing some characters, and if she has the glut of power, because she is a sap power character, sometimes you just end up with 4, 5, 6 power randomly a turn. She can definitely put that power to use either from an extra biokinesis or from using the death active ability. So I think she's a fine Death. I think she's a pretty good Famine. That's kind of where I sit. I think Famine, giving her that action compression, is going to really increase her game.
Yes, and definitely one of the sturdiest Famine Horsemen, right? As far
Absolutely.
as you have to chew through so much health, there's a healing factor as well, and then also all the tricky defense techniques where it's a stealth that you can't ignore from Directive 1 or anything.
Right.
So and then she can potentially just run away if you just move into range. So it becomes very tricky to try to take this particular Famine Horseman down.
Absolutely, and that stealth really combines well with the Famine ability or the Famine evolution token, where she wants to be away from people.
Yep. So yeah, definitely, I think there's a great slot for Cassandra Nova in this particular affiliation. And also, I like to just call it, she's got Explosive Force. That's one of the best triggers to just clear a point. It's like, hey, you get this, you own this point.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, there are times where people would take tactics cards to do the same thing as that one wild trigger, which on 8 dice or potentially 11 dice, you with rerolls, you are getting that wild more often than not.
Yeah. So I'm very excited for her in this affiliation. Anytime, especially with the new Deadpool Wolverine movie that came out, I think there's a renewed resurgence in Cassandra Nova. So let's see her on the table more. I would love to see that.
Absolutely, and I think this might be one of the best homes that she has. I think the ability to give her the Famine with the 2-inch place wraps up her kit in a nice little package and makes her more than a gimmick character. Next, we have Colossus.
Ooh, okay.
Colossus is an interesting character. He got a rework. I was not a particular fan of changing his bodyguard to a taunt. And I like the other things that they did on his card for the rework, but especially the moving from slow to a medium move on a medium base, fits well with our faction, right? Here we go with another big base medium mover. Yep. And, but, I always felt like he's just below a 4-point character. So, he is hardy, which is something that the faction as a whole lacks a little bit, right?
Yep.
He's got the damage reduction on it. He can't be pushed by enemy effects. He can add 2 dice to his defense roll on physical and energy attacks. So to me, he's going to be like a rock for this faction when they need a rock.
Right, he's an anchor point, right? That you can sort of put up there and be relatively confident that he's not going to move around much unless they have a throw.
No, and people are going to throw him. People do throw him, or advance him with Cassandra Nova. Yeah. So, that is a concern. For my experience with Colossus is he's a walk once, punch once character. if you do have a scenario where he can stand on a scenario, and we're in these tight spaces where his taunt works, he's going to really shine. So he can be Pestilence and War. War is pretty cool for him specifically. With the taunt on the tight scenarios, he's going to be able to pull in the damage kind of when he wants to, right?
Right. You choose when to spend the power to like take the attack, right?
Right.
As long as they're within range too.
With the damage reduction and evolution token rerolls, he will be able to choose when he wants to take 1 damage and when he doesn't. He's got a pretty healthy health pool, so when you're blocking, going, oh man, I'm going to reroll 1 with an evolution token, get it back, take the damage if you want.
Yep. So yeah, and then also on the backside, we forgot to mention that he also counts. So instead of the boost dice ability, he gets to count blanks, right?
Right.
Which is like, if you forgot, on Captain America and anyone else that does that, makes them pretty annoying to take down, actually.
No, absolutely. And blanks with rerolls, again, just like adding dice, really stacking that with your rerolls, adding extra dice faces with your rerolls is amazing.
2 extra faces with the counter successful defense is incredible.
So he can be Pestilence. That's certainly something that's written on the affiliation list.
Shane, I actually don't hate him as Pestilence, mostly because like this is a character that you're actually very comfortable putting within range 2 of a bunch of characters in the first place. So because that's going to be more taunt opportunities, right, for him as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's going to be fine. He's only got one special condition written on his card. A second one on the same attack, which you're already applying a special condition. So the stagger isn't going to mean anything more. Those staggers are really good condition. My problem is he has a throw. It's a 3-cost throw. Is he going to have 5 power? So now am I spending evolution tokens to spread conditions around? That's fine, but it's a net 0, and we want to be a positive, right?
Right. But just saying that, like, the kit itself of just, like, let's say, because I believe shock is one of the pestilence conditions, right? So reducing everyone's attack dice by 1 and having a taunter at the same time, like, that's going to make it really debilitating, I think, for some people. And also, the X-Slam does give out stun automatically. It's not just a stagger, right? So,
But because the second condition is on there, the stagger doesn't give you an evolution token, right? Because it's to different characters. So you were already applying the stun, so the stagger trigger only gives you stagger, which is really good.
Yeah.
I'm not going to balk at getting stagger, but he's only got, he's got to spend 3 power to put out a condition on his own or 2 power from the ability. So to me, the Pestilence is really weird. War, I think, is going to be pretty good for him. Because we know these damage reduction guys, especially with rerolls, taking 1 damage is their specialty.
Right. Yeah.
We've seen it time and time again. All of these damage reduction characters, they just suffer 1 damage. Most attacks might as well do 1 damage to this guy.
Right. So yeah, let's say, yeah, definitely Colossus is one of the most premier like war Horseman there is, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have particularly large dice pools, which is going to drop down the usefulness of the war active power. I think he only uses it when he has a glut of power, but he will generate you the evolution tokens.
Right, because he's happy to take the damage, and he probably won't be punished terribly for doing that.
Now, I know you hate this guy.
Oh, yes. Me notorious Deadpool hater, and not the guy that splashes him every web warrior list that I have. I personally love Deadpool. The rework that he received earlier definitely put him well above the curve as far as like 3 threats goes. I think he has a great utility box as far as like movement, the ability to drain power, and also just to put out raw damage like as a 3 threat. Like it's a great kit, and also just randomly good against mystic attackers as well. So what does he get in Servants of the Apocalypse?
He could be Famine and War.
Ooh, okay.
Moving twice.
Oh.
With range 2 places.
Yep.
Range 2 place. Take 4 shots with bang. Range 2 place.
Yep.
Nested rerolls.
Yes.
He knows karate.
Yep.
He also knows something about evolution. He's the Darwin of karate, I guess. And so nested rerolls is really good, especially when you're looking triggers. For him, triggers are really big, right? Stab, stab, bang, bang are really important for him to hit. And, so using those tokens is going to be good on him. The amount of damage he can randomly put out with those nested rerolls is going to be really high.
Can confirm through experience.
But leg day with the Famine ability on an infinity formula or something like that for Deadpool to jump up, take 4 attacks, jump backwards. My experience is he generates power well enough that he will be able to do all of that without spending evolution tokens to do that. He kind of wants to be at range 4, especially on his front side. He doesn't want to take damage. So my experience in his play pattern has always been he's kind of near the back of your field. He comes forward, does some damage, does some pokes, and then wants to retreat backwards. So I think he will get you your Famine token. Well, he can just automatically do it every turn. Right.
Yeah. Just by staying away from people, right?
Yep. He can take 1 bang attack, even if it doesn't hit. That gives him his 2nd power. So he spends 2 power for leg day, 2 power for, from the evolution tokens, and he's moving all the way back, and it's a net -1 evolution token.
Right.
It's not what you want, but I think consistently he will be able to get you the one without having to spend any evolution tokens on the power.
I would agree, yes.
My experience is this guy always has power. The power drain inside of this affiliation that has the ability to add a power drain every game is interesting. I'm not sure how good it is. I think it'll be something that's worth trying.
Yeah, so to activate that, you need 5 power, right? Between Merc with a Mouth and also being within 2 to activate the Famine jump in the first place.
Yeah, or 3 power and 2 evolution tokens.
Right.
So if the evolution tokens are being spent on draining a power and moving him, that's probably a decent use of evolution tokens. If he's already removing the power. But he's got so many options. Those options being available against the right target, draining 3 power from a Hulk who hasn't activated yet is, especially if they just have their base power, it can just be debilitating, right?
Yeah, if you happen to drain 3 power off a Hulk, no one's attacked him, he's kind of SOL.
Right. Like that guy is just not doing anything this turn. If I can make your 6-point model not do anything this turn, I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, and personally, I also really love Deadpool as a general for late game because he always counts as healthy. So that means even if someone dazes him, he still is going to help you contribute to scoring like late game. So ton of options.
And with a 6-point leader, that's really, really important, right?
Yes.
We
need that more than ever.
We do not want to fall behind on points, or we only want to fall so far behind on points. So that is going to be really, really important.
Yep. And so what do you think about him in war?
He is going to damage 1 or multiple characters every turn. He's, with his healing factor, the 4 hit points is a little weird because sometimes he just gets randomly 1 shot. Yep. But when he lives, it's going to be extra feels bad for your opponent. And I think it's actually going to make them think twice about attacking him, which will work out in his favor, right?
Yes. And the other thing that war does bring is that if you are doing the bang attacks like within range 2, that could potentially be a reason for you to try to fish out for more. Granted, it's only a 4 dice pool, but that's up to you as a player to decide if that's a thing you want to even fish for in the first place.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I would say Famine would probably be for more often than not, versus War versus Famine, you'll probably take him as Famine.
I think he's happy. I think he's perfectly happy to be either. I think he's probably, because he will generate you the evolution tokens, I think he's probably just totally happy being whatever you want to give him. Just kind of like Deadpool is, right?
Yeah, that's true. He's like, I'll get you your money, boss. No problem.
Kind of.
Ooh, Gambit.
I think Gambit's an underrated character.
I would agree.
I've played him a lot. I think, the reliable size 3 push is really good.
Yes.
I think his tactics card that gives your whole squad stealth can be amazing. Apocalypse with stealth is gonna it's gonna cause some headaches.
Right.
I think it will generate you some good first round ability with Dark Past to move around the board in interesting ways. Other than that, like, he doesn't add a ton to the faction. It's really the ability for him to get that good push. The evolution tokens make the push even more likely. So changing a hit to a wild is pretty likely. Changing a hit to a wild when you have rerolls becomes extremely likely, right?
Yeah.
So now for that push, you've got, like, I think it's a 90-something% chance on the 4-die attack if you're willing to spend 3 rerolls on it.
Right.
So when you need that push, he is going to be able to do it.
Yes.
He's fragile.
He's very fragile. Yes.
Rerolls on defense actually helps him quite a bit, right? Because he's just a stock standard 3-point character with 3s across the board and 5 health. So giving him those rerolls is going to increase his survivability in a very measurable way.
Yes. So when you combine the fact that, like, the evolution tokens are what's being spent for the rerolls, right? So it's not digging into his own power economy. He can then probably pay for the enhanced agility after surviving the attack to now get out of range, hopefully of the range 3 or whatever attack that he was just experiencing.
Absolutely. So now he's got 2 people he could be. He could be Death or Famine. Mm-hmm. Famine is really good. Helps him in all sorts of ways. Mm-hmm. He loves to move out of range after he is, used his range 3 attack. He's totally fine as Famine. Mm-hmm. He dies a lot, so he's cool as Death, right?
Yes. Yeah, so I would say I personally would lean more towards Death because, like, he is just so fragile that he probably will die and generate you 6 tokens, and that's his floor.
In addition to that, my experience has been when he wakes up, if he is not killed, he will daze someone. He will use an accelerated charge, a 52-card pickup, and kill or daze or KO 1 to 2 characters.
Right, yeah.
So I think he's going to generate you 9 tokens a turn, or 9 tokens a game. He's going to 6 himself from getting dazed and KO'd.
Yep.
And then at least 3 from taking somebody with him.
Yeah, and I think that means that he's a very decent, like, Death Mantle.
Absolutely.
Horseman.
Absolutely. The active power from Death is good. It does perfectly fine things for him.
It does increase the dice pool, so that gives you that wider chance of getting, that conversion, right? For
right.
It's a little something extra.
When you're looking also at Flurry of Cards, which is the trigger on 52-card pickup, which happens as many times as you get wilds.
Yep.
Adding extra dice for that. He's going to compound, and I think Death gives him a lot. Adding extra dice, he has ways to add extra dice. If they have 3 damage on them, adding extra, it'll be actually better to use the Horseman ability than his accelerated charge ability. But doing one attack at 10 dice and then a bunch of attacks at 7 dice for his beam is going to be really good.
Yep. And this would also, like, if you're assuming you wake up with, like, 9 or 10 power, you could potentially, do the spender, pay for the stuff with the evolution tokens, still do the accelerated charge, and you still have power left over to do a little something extra to get at least 1 or 2, like, wilds, right? Well.
Absolutely. And that's Magical Christmas Land, obviously, we're talking about. But the potential is there, right? Yeah. Also, Famine, when you have a beam, being able to place range 2 before your beam, Crimson Dynamo told me was pretty good.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
So in the later game, getting the 52-card pickup with the Famine is going to be really interesting. And it is a beam 4, so he will be able to stay further away to get the Famine power. Yep. I think he's still a pretty bad character. or an underrated character
So
who still isn't on the curve.
right.
But we fix them, right?
fix 'em, yeah.
We fix some stuff. I don't think you'll ever be disappointed for taking Gambit.
No, I think he's a very interesting death character. For me, like I think Famine's going to be a harder sell only because like it's such an important ability for Apocalypse to have throughout the course of the game that if he gets taken out early, it means that he is going to lose out on that, and that's the thing I am a little anxious about.
Absolutely, and if he is Famine, they are going to target him.
Yes.
Your Famine is probably going to get targeted a lot anyways, but when your Famine is Gambit, they're going to send a beater at him and he's going to go down.
Yeah, they will chase him down and try to like end him as quick as they can.
But being Famine to me raises him up to a higher level than before because it is so important for Apocalypse to have Famine. He's a 3-cost character, so putting Famine on a 3-cost character makes your list building a little bit easier. But so I think he's going to be fine.
Yeah, he'll be fine. Definitely try him out. Like, everyone out there in the audience, please give Gambit a try under Servants Apocalypse. I think you might be pleasantly surprised. So what's the next character you'd like to talk about, Shane?
The next character doesn't care because it's Honey Badger.
Oh, yeah, she don't care.
She don't care. She don't care. When you have a 6-point leader, getting a 2-point model on your list is pretty good.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
She's got some problems where when you have a 6-point leader and you're going to be playing tall, having a character that can't interact with the scenario is tough. So it's a bonus, but also, she's going to need to bring Jonathan the Unstoppable or she's just going to be a detriment, I think.
Well, I mean, so when you take Honey Badger, like this is not a scoring piece, right? You're kind of like all in on either damage like redirection or you're in there for the ankle biter debuff.
Absolutely, and the ankle biter debuff is good. The too dangerous to ignore is really good, right? We've got some fragile pieces that we've talked about already. We've got some more coming up. We've got a 6-point leader who, if that 6-point leader goes down, it's going to be a real big problem for us, right? So having too dangerous to ignore and having her just floating around Apocalypse is probably going to be fine. Her sister is not in the faction. If her sister was in the faction, I would rate her a lot higher than I do. The out of activation movement from both her and her sister would be really good in this. And it may be worth looking at taking her sister as an out of faction splash, right?
Sure, that's potentially a thing you can do. I will say though, like with the celestial technology that Apocalypse does have though, that could be a way for you to, let's say, set up a Honey Badger like in the place that you want her to be, even if she was over there doing something else, and now suddenly, hey, you now ankle bitered somebody, and they're set up for an attack, right, and a taunt. So like, right. I don't want to discount like Honey Badger because I think she is actually really interesting.
I mean, I do think if you're going to go with Apocalypse first in a turn, and you want to take out a Hulk or a Thor or somebody, and that person is already near you, pulling her in to remove that defense die, is it worth the 4 power? I don't know, but also she's going to be in position too dangerous to ignore for you back. So it's going to make them deal with your 2-point character. So that is a really good call out. I think there is a lot of play pattern where she could be useful.
Mm-hmm. I will also say that I did get to play a practice game. We were just kind of like, pretending to have the model since the cards were just released. And I'll tell you, the evolution tokens really make this character stay on the board way longer than I would normally expect to. This particular opponent of mine did decide to run her under the death, and I think she's death and war, right? Those are the two.
Correct. And both of those have their advantages. I mean, she's there to die, right? Her job on the field is to die. You are guaranteed 6 evolution tokens.
Yes.
Because of too dangerous to ignore, you kind of get to choose when you get those 6 evolution tokens. You take a little bit of agency out of your opponent's hands, which is pretty cool, right? So that's definitely a positive on her. War, she's going to take some damage with the healing factor. She's got a little bit more staying power. Like you said, adding in the rerolls from the evolution tokens, she's got a little bit more staying power. And she is the toughest to threat.
Yeah.
Question mark.
Yeah, and also like remember her base attack is also a 5-die attack, which is well above the weight for a 2-threat typically.
Yeah, and my counter to that is her spender is also a 5-die attack, so the war superpower is not going to be great on her.
No, I would think not.
You know, that superpower does better the larger dice pools you have. She's also not ankle bitering people when she's attacking, so you know she's rolling a 5-die attack, which unless you're spending evolution tokens, is going to do 0 damage 1 in 4 shots against your average character.
Right, which is why I think like if I had to take her, you know, on paper, I think she's an interesting option for death.
Absolutely. Because like we said, she's there to die. Sometimes 5-die attacks do randomly, rip a model off the table. It's not unheard of.
Yeah, and sometimes you may actually have in the position where they have taken 2 or 3 damage, and now she's doing a 7 or 8-die attack base that will generate power, and then that means she's sufficiently powered for the rest of any abilities that she would need for the rest of the game.
I still think that because there's another 2-point model in the faction who I respect a lot more than her, that she will be more towards the bottom of the list. I think that there are a lot better war models than her. And that other 2-threat model, I believe, can be death as well.
Yes. So she has direct competition in the theoretical best horseman that she would be in.
Right. So, I think for me, she sounds interesting, but I think she's going to be a little tough to get on the field. But I'm okay being wrong with that. To me, she is the lowest of the in-faction models for importance. I just think her drawbacks are too big, and maybe I'm discounting the ankle biter and stuff like that. Ankle biter generally is more valuable the more models you have to take advantage of it, because the more attacks you're making, removing that 1 die has a bigger impact.
Right.
Because you have a 6-point leader, you are automatically lowering the amount of models you have on the field.
So it's important that AMG did clarify that you could take, theoretically, 5 models, including Apocalypse, that's 16 threat. So that 5-wide list, I think, can be very interesting because that's going to give you a lot of activation advantage, considering like how high of a threat your leader is to begin with. And you're also a faction that natively has access to incinerate, right? As long as you can put conditions out on people. So combining, ankle biter and incinerate on a model, most models will have a baseline of 3 defense going down to 1. So I think there could be some interesting play patterns, list constructions, and plans that can be enacted with this. So it's, again, a big open field for experimentation. So even though maybe Honey Badger historically has not been the most, like power player, let's say, she can have access to some interesting techniques and tricks in this affiliation that I think may boost her up just a little bit more. So I'm excited to see, again, what players do with them. So please try it out as well.
Absolutely. I think as we go through this, I think it's really important to point out that these are opinions, but also that everything should be tried. This game varies a lot depending on your play style, your opponent's play style, the terrain on the board. So, anything that we think or say is lower doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that we're ranking it lower in this vacuum that we're looking at right now.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree, Shane. So yeah, so just because something may appear like slightly better than something doesn't necessarily mean that the thing that's on the lower end is a bad model or a bad card. Like these are all, I think, still great models. Some people may not think that, but we think everyone has a lot of play.
Yeah, and you can definitely adjust your game plan to make things work the way that you want them to work. And that's a nice segue into a model that you really want to work.
I think Iceman's really cool, personally. But I don't know. What do you think of Iceman and as a whole, and then as a Horseman?
I don't like 4-die attacks, but it's a beam.
It's a beam.
So it's got a condition on it. He gains an automatic power. Beams that gain automatic power, we've seen in the past, are really good. He's got some good ways to use that power. So he can be death and famine. Again, death, he's fine at dying. So he personally does not kill a lot of people. So it's going to be interesting. He can accidentally kill somebody on their own activation, which is funny. Your opponent has to be party to it, so I don't foresee it ever happening, but it's definitely a possibility. So Freeze and Fade is really good in Famine. We know Famine's good. Yeah. He wants to be at range 4, having more movement stuff where he can Famine forward, attack once, freeze and fade backwards, gives him a lot of agency of where his position is on the board and getting that evolution token. Because the beam gives you +1 power for each attack. He generally is going to have enough power to freeze and fade, as well as enough power to use the Horseman power. So for me, that'll be interesting. Round 1, again, you have a medium move, medium base model. He'll be able to walk forward and get a freezing blast, get 1-2 characters, get that range 2 place to come even more forward, or to back off just outside of that range 3 to get the Famine evolution token.
Right, you can choose either to go for the token or just to get yourself back on the point, right?
Right, absolutely, which is going to be an interesting play pattern that he's going to have. He's got the stagger trigger on his spender. It's fine. I think Apocalypse likes stagger going out because removing any actions from your opponent is going to be really big with a 6-point leader. So that's fine. Ice Slide doesn't work on half of the models in the affiliation, but the ones that it does work on, it's going to be really good.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, we can't move around Apocalypse, unfortunately. But yeah, some of the smaller guys, maybe we can move them into a position that's very advantageous.
Yeah, so I think he's going to be a solid character. I think he really wanted to be Pestilence, and I'm sad he's not Pestilence. Again, I never read the Apocalypse comic books, so I don't know where he fit inside of that world. Right. But I think having a character who has, the wild slow and the slow when the enemies come near him and stuff, would have been a cool Pestilence. You see what I did there? A cool Pestilence.
Yeah. Yes. This is he's the Iceman, Bobby.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, so for Pestilence specifically, do they have to gain the condition during that character's activation? So if there is
the Pestilence character has to apply the condition
during his activation, the timing of the code step unfortunately doesn't quite work.
It doesn't really work
because they need to be actions, and actions can only be taken during the enemy character's activation.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any synergy with Pestilence and Iceman there. Again, it'd be a lot cooler if
it would be a lot cooler
if he was Pestilence, but
Yeah, I would say certainly, if you need him to be your Famine character, he can definitely be the hit and run character, just like Deadpool can be, just with a different ability suite. Death, I think, it's interesting. I think if you're taking him for Death, you're expecting him, either to die or to really do a very powered up chill to get that stagger. That's the only other thing I can think of is that I'm going to spend 3 power, potentially make this an 8 to 10 dice, energy spender that can stagger randomly, which can be good since it's a range 3 attack.
Yeah, I mean, or you're planning on a joint effort or something like that on the beam. There's certainly ways for him to kill, but I think you need to build around that, and I don't think you want to build around Iceman killing models. I think there are better characters in this affiliation to build around them killing models. So I think he's a fine death, but I really think Famine is where this guy wants to be.
I would agree with you, yeah. So in the sense that like Deadpool is your power draining, damage dealing Famine that can fire and fade. Iceman is more going to be the debuff like Famine, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And like you said, the ability to move your other models around is going to be pretty cool. My experience with Iceman is he kind of moves all over the table, right? The medium move, medium base with the hit and run. He kind of gets all over the place. So next is Magic.
Magic's an interesting one. Most in the sense that like I think she's a glass cannon model to me, right? When I think of Magic, I think of a character that potentially hits very hard, especially with that spender that gets to count skulls, right? Both for what was it, you and your opponents?
Yeah, Darkchild is awesome. They've been adding more of these skull attacks into the game. Every time they add a new one, I go back and look at Magic and go, man, if she could just live, if she could be the boy who lived, then we would be having a different conversation.
Right.
My experience with Magic is she folds over, right? Just like Gambit, just like Iceman. She's a 3/3/4. I don't think the Foreign Mystic really changes that a lot.
I mean, she is really good against Mystic attacks. So it's like if you think like your Servant's Apocalypse is going to be facing a lot of Mystic attackers, I can see a corner case reason, right, that you should immediately think about slotting her.
To me, her personal ability to move around the table with Limbo Step is amazing, right? She's got that mobility to be where you want to be and spread out scenarios and that kind of stuff. She'll be really good. The Soul Sword attack, the 5-die Mystic with a Pierce, with rerolls, getting that Pierce is much more likely. Adding in War on top of that is going to be really interesting because it's going to kind of double down on it. Yeah. Like we talked about before, I don't think you want to use more on 5-die attacks, but if you do, might be pretty cool. Using the War Power on Darkchild will be fine. Yeah. But, because you've already got the extra skulls added onto the attack, changing more results into hits, changing your blanks and your shields into hits will kind of double down and maybe push her over that level to kill somebody in one. But I think she's probably just better off saving that power and using... Limbo Step is a really good ability, and she uses it all the time, and she uses it well.
Yeah, she wants to use a spender. She wants to use Limbo Step. So I think that mostly means that the power is spoken for most of the time.
Yeah.
That you have on her.
As far as gaining evolution tokens with War, she'll be fine. My experience is she damages a character every turn. Either through the 4-die energy attack at range 4, where she's just sitting on a back infinity or something and throwing out. Yep. Or getting that Soul Sword attack and getting the Pierce through. So I think she'll be a fine War. She's Famine. Famine's really good.
Famine's good.
You
can Limbo Step in, right, and then you can use the Famine to get out and still generate that evolution token, right?
Yep.
After doing 2 attacks.
So she will be able to do that on a consistent basis where she's got that hit and run ability, just like we've been talking about with some of the other characters. Her biggest problem there is she's matched up against Deadpool. You and I are both really high on Deadpool. So, she doesn't have the staying power. She's got maybe a similar or different offensive capability to Deadpool. Yeah. He's probably a little bit more consistent. She's probably got a higher ceiling.
So the thing that she does bring up, because we are talking about like trying to compare apples to apples here, is that, yeah, they both have the same job, but she does bring a very good tactics card, right?
So with that tactics card, she can give Apocalypse the power or the healing from giving him that incinerate, which to me is going to be a really big deal. I mean, it's a good card anyway, right? Either using it offensively to bring somebody in to give him power. Apocalypse doesn't want to be chasing. He wants to be, just punching dudes in the face. That portion of it will be really good. Or healing, giving Apocalypse power and moving him, getting him back into position when Hulk just threw him medium and he's a sad boy, is going to be important.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so Magic's card directly helps a lot of Apocalypse's plan either to, bring him forward or bring someone to him, right?
Absolutely. So I think it's going to be good. I think that journey through Limbo is going to be good. I think if you do take her, I think that card automatically makes your 10.
I think so too.
And I think more often than not, it's going to make your 5. I just can't see you playing her in Servants of Apocalypse without it.
Right. It brings so much real utility, especially a very pivotal utility like play that you can do. So yeah, I think that's kind of stapled there. And so that would be my pitch of why you would take Magic over Deadpool, in that case.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A little bit of more helpfulness and synergy with the team instead of just an independent actor.
Yeah, granted, you're like one of the best like independent actors in the game. So again, up to the player's preference, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the next character on the list is one of my favorite characters, both in comics, in X-Men '97, in the game. Mr. Sinister's got a ton of text on his card.
He's so cool.
He is so cool. Pro tip for anybody who hasn't painted Sinister and is going to for this, leave the cape off. Please. Paint the cape first, then attach it. I have made mistakes in my life. All right, so let's talk about some of the good things about Mr. Sinister.
Yep.
He can move characters just like Cassandra Nova,
Yep.
right? He can spend a power and trade a genetic sample token for an evolution token if he's Pestilence.
Right.
So with his genetic negation, character within 3, spend a power, remove a genetic sample, character gets the root condition. Apocalypse likes the root condition. His spender, as we talked about, needs the root condition to be applied before he activates in order to get that throw.
Oh, you mean the builder, right?
Or the builder, sorry, the builder, not the spender.
Okay, yeah. But yeah, I totally agree because there's only a few, really root is not that particularly common as a,
No.
There's only a few characters. A couple of them are in this list, thankfully.
Yeah, which is very funny. He personally can remove genetic samples to get rid of conditions, which is cool and nifty. I don't think people are going to be taking condition crews into Apocalypse. I don't think people take condition crews anyway just to take condition crews. But I do think people are going to take staggers. I think you're going to see your Black Cats. I think you're going to see your other easy stagger characters, your Shang-Chi, your Namor, though Namor might be a little bit of a liability because Apocalypse may just blow him up. Like there's going to be this give and take. Yeah. Because his charge, if I'm doing the math correctly, Apocalypse placed from Famine can attack him if he's within charge range. So there's going to be like this cat and mouse with Namor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There's a lot of jockeying positioning and big position plays to see you through the match. But anyway, Mr. Sinister, right?
But yeah, so the ability to remove this stagger in the stagger meta is going to be really good. Just advancing characters for 2 power, any size movement. It's really good. It's once per turn, thankfully. He's got a little bit of staying power with spending his genetic samples to remove to stop damage from coming through. It's maybe one of the worst of those types of abilities because he wants to spend those genetic samples another way.
Right. But it should be noted that so that genetic sample damage reduction means that it doesn't say minimum of 1. Right, you can reduce damage down to 0, which is very good.
Fair. He's got the crazy area attack, which is going to be interesting. But I don't think that's what he wants to do. I think he wants to be beaming people, getting the genetic samples. He could be Famine. We just talked about it. A range 2 place plus beam 4 is really good. That's going to give him the genetic samples that he's going to then use to put out the root on people. Right. His strike is a range 3 5-die strike. So if somebody does move towards him, he can strike Famine away.
Yep.
And Famine will be fine, and I think setting up the beam will be cool for him. But I really think Pestilence is where it's at for this guy. You know, if he can get the powertrain going to just be able to hand out those roots, it's as many genetic samples as he has and as much power as he has. So he can do 2-3 a turn, and I think on a likely turn he will do a couple of those every turn.
Yeah, so I'm thinking that, you know, he can pulse, as Pestilence, he can pulse out the conditions, and then for people that are further away, yeah, you can also then give them a route, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, there's a little bit of synergy there with Apocalypse's ability to change the condition where, you know, you give out root and then you give it out again and he turns it into something else. You're in that case, you're going down this power slope where how much power do you want to spend?
Right.
But it does exist. Overall, I think this is one of the best homes for Sinister.
Yes, and like we talked about before, talking about celestial technology again, setting up a beam, right? So even though if you don't assign him the Pestilence, he does have a way in faction now to get that extra movement, set up a beam, and maybe that's going to be the big play of like Apocalypse lines them up. Great, he's going to go and beam like, you know, 2 groups of people, right?
And, you know, beam 4 is so long. And when you can perfect position set up for that beam 4 with Apocalypse teleporting you in at the beginning of a turn for you to first activation shoot that beam is going to be great.
Yeah.
And the beam's Mystic, which to me is maybe the best attack type out there.
Yeah, well, I'll say it's certainly really good in the Web Warriors. That
Right.
I can tell you for sure. And there's usually a bunch of them lined up, ready to get clobbered.
Yep. So overall, I think Sinister, this is going to be an interesting home for him. I think he makes use of Pestilence better than anybody else in the faction. So if you are looking to have a Pestilence in faction, I think he's maybe the best guy for it.
Yeah, you certainly can't go wrong using Mr. Sinister as your Pestilence Horseman.
No, and I think he's fine as Famine, like we talked about. I think that extra movement solves some problems that he has because he doesn't have action compression, right? That's one of his downfalls. So overall, I think he helps the team. His tactics cards, you know, I'm not super excited about bringing in the extra characters. I think that's probably more cute than it is worthwhile.
I think the amount of resources you spend to sort of set it up, which would be the opportunity cost, would be spending this genetic tokens on the cloning banks, means that you're not using the genetic tokens to can out the root, the damage mitigation. And
Absolutely.
I will say that force extraction, though, might be interesting, though.
It can set up some really good early round plays. You've got some healing factor characters in faction, 3 of them in fact, or 4 of them. 3 that we've already talked about, like 5,
Yep.
Sabertooth.
Yeah, and don't
the
forget
one I was
Apocalypse
forgetting.
himself can heal
Yep.
as well, so there could be a time where he takes an attack, does 0 damage, and he'll heal back a force extract damage as well.
You know, so the forced extraction will give you the ability to just root on turn 1. He'll be able to just double walk, root somebody, gain the evolution token, but now he's also rooted the person that's in front of Apocalypse, or a Loki Prince of Lies, or somebody like that who wants to use a ton of superpowers.
Yeah.
Right? You know, if he can walk up and root a Thanos, he's pretty excited.
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, I'm super excited for Mr. Sinister. It's a very inventive kit. It was an early kit that was made, and I think it's still very cool. And now we have a new way to play him, right? And I'm very excited to see him on the field.
Psylocke.
Yeah, Psylocke.
The only bad thing I've ever heard about Psylocke is from people who are playing against the person playing Psylocke.
Yeah, I can't confirm. She's a menace.
She's a menace. She is, to me, a well-balanced 4 threat who does a lot of really cool stuff. She is one of the best characters in the game to me, not because she's the most overpowered, but because she has her weaknesses, she has her strengths. She's really well designed and is good, but not too good.
I would agree with that, yeah. She's got just the right balance of like, you can situationally make her kind of hard to put down between the martial artists and the rerolls. And she wants to be within range 2, I think, a lot of times, right, to get the most
Yeah.
bang for a buck. But at the same time, if you can stay outside of 3 of other characters that take advantage of that stealth, that means that it's going to take a little bit of resources or actions to actually get to her and try to take her down. And she hits like a truck. Oh, man.
Yeah, but she needs that power to hit like a truck. The good news is now in Apocalypse, she can get that power without spending the power on telepathic precognition so that she can get the rerolls from the evolution tokens and get her power train going. So I think if you thought she was good before, now you're going to think she's really good. Nested rerolls is really good. Getting her power train going is really good. The ability to get the pursuit without her spending power is going to be really easy with the evolution tokens. She's got the chase ability. You talked about her survivability with the martial arts stealth. Again, add nested rerolls on top of that. She's going to be really survivable, really offensively outputting. I think she's just going to be an awesome character.
And I also want to note that the telepathic precognition it's a rule that people love, but it's also kind of misplayed sometimes. So number one, unlike a lot of other reroll tech, it's like, hey, you can actually modify as many dice as you can pay power for, in that one go. And also it is only once per turn. So typically if you're swinging twice with her, unfortunately, that means that you only could really reroll one of your attacks. Now with the Horseman tokens as well, that will at least have you 2 different sources of rerolls. So therefore both of your attacks can potentially get rerolls into, which is a nice buff to our offensive consistency.
Right, and that's going to give her the flexibility to either do one really big reroll attack or 2 extremely consistent attacks, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Her chase ability, I think, really helps. We've talked about that a lot in this faction. It's one of the things they do well is movement, I think. She doesn't have any personal displacement. That kind of feels a little bad. And I mean enemy personal displacement, right? Like she doesn't have pushes, she doesn't have throws. That's probably the only negative thing you could potentially say about her.
But given this kid, right, that, it's made to be within range 2 and she's made to essentially blend people.
Yeah. She could be Death and Famine. Famine's great, right? Like we've talked about it. She's a stealth character, so moving on a range. My personal experience with her is she does not want to be outside of range 3. She wants to be in range 3, so the next turn she can walk short, add 2 dice to the attack, blender somebody, and be on that point. Or if she killed that person, walk to the next person to kill. Right? Like she does not want to be on an island by herself. She is perfectly fine on like a D, taking a flank and trying to one-on-one people. But then, with Famine, you're hoping she gets the kill or she doesn't get the evolution token.
Okay, I could see that. I would have thought it'd be different because in the sense that you want to take advantage of martial arts, so you probably either want to stay within 2. But I think so. Let me try to like math it out. So if you're in range 2 of somebody, right, and you decide to Famine hop out, okay, so now you're just over that 6 inches, right?
Right.
If you were to then start her turn again, telekinetic combat up, would you still be within range 2 of the person? I think you would be, actually.
Yeah, you could do that. It's a lot of power expenditure to jump in and out, and I think she's got a lot of really good ways to spend her power. The reroll, being uncapped is, really good ways to spend her power. Yeah. So I don't think she wants to do that. I don't think, I think she wants to do the telekinetic combat enhancement every turn in order to get the 2 dice. It's a 1-for-1 dice, which has some positioning fixing in it, which is always great, right? But I don't think she wants to spend the power to Famine back out.
Okay, all right, yeah. That's the thing I wanted to get your opinion on is like, so in that case, would you lean her more towards death?
I would lean her more towards death. My experience has been when I play against a Psylocke, I want to kill her. If I don't kill her and she runs roughshod, it's a bad time for me.
Right.
When I've played with Psylocke, my opponents have always tried to target her down. Because again, they don't want to see her punching people in the face. So I think she's really good at death. I also think she's really good at death because of the nested rerolls, her 7-die builder. She is just going to kill people.
Yeah, I think that's the quintessential like death question, right? You ask somebody when you make her Horseman,
Right.
it's like, well, I'm gonna kill you unless you kill me, but regardless, I'm gonna get a ton of like evolution tokens out of this
Right.
character.
And she does help the Apocalypse affiliation with the stun, which is before damage on her spender. Getting more of those conditions out there is really good. Overall, I see her as death. I think offensive deaths, she's probably one of the best because I think she wants to kill people and she's also going to explode eventually by the end of the game.
Yep, and she's one of the few people that actually has naturally the ability to have a large dice pool, right, to begin with.
Right.
Especially for a builder, which is, a 7-die builder already, just always.
Right.
Yeah, amazing.
And her builder randomly does the lose power ability, which, as we've talked about, we've seen that come up now. We didn't mention it one of the times. It's come up like 4 or 5 times now.
Yeah.
So the power drain is real, especially with the root conditions we're putting out combined with the power drain. And her ability to get the extra wilds is, through the rerolls is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, you can have like very power intensive factions like Asgard that, when they're rooted and then Psylocke gets the right triggers and the stun against them, like that can really change the entire, options, right, that they have, like very like super limiting what they can do in a turn.
Yeah, I mean, Midgard, Thor, Loki are trying to spend power on your turn. So if you're draining that power away and they can't spend it on your turn, they're going to be really upset with you.
Yeah, no, this is a low-key like piece of, I think, emphasis that the Apocalypse affiliation has, and definitely should be explored.
Absolutely.
Okay, this is probably my favorite model. I've mentioned this in a few places before that I think Sabertooth is an underrated model, but he's also, I think, one of the best war models, potentially. So on the opposite end of the spectrum, whereas I think we discussed how Colossus was really good at taking hits, right? Sabertooth can generate the extra power because he can generate attacks out of activation.
Absolutely. Combine that with his aggressive, so it's really difficult for your opponent to damage him and have him not be able to get back in range to do the Untamed Force. It makes him a really good war. This guy, I see generating you more war tokens than possibly anybody else.
Yes.
He's got high health pools. He's got the healing factor. He's got the ability to do damage on the opponent's turn. I see this guy being a really good war.
I would agree. Arguably the best one offensively, I think, as far as like being able to get the amount of attacks and generate the amount of evolution tokens in a turn. So immediately just want to say that he's a great kit. If you haven't tried him out, like that aggressive and Untamed Force like combination puts him in a really interesting spot as far as being able to really potentially take away an activation during an opponent's activation, which is huge sometimes. But the other place he can be is what? Pestilence, right?
Correct. So Pestilence is a little bit of a head scratcher. He's got the wild bleed. I don't think that he wants to spend power on pestilencing people around him. I think No Mercy not being once per turn and Untamed Force being on his card, you don't want to drain him of power. He wants to be able to threaten the Untamed Force.
Yes.
Because the Untamed Force doesn't need to take damage. So there are going to be times where an attack's going to come into him and do 0, where you're going to want to attack back. So you're going to want to save power at the end of all of his turns. And No Mercy is just a great active superpower, right?
Yeah.
It's so good. It's on one of our Horseman cards. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you can make him death plus war, right? In a way.
Absolutely, absolutely. In his, normally I'm not as high on spenders as I am with him. His Savage Predator being able to give you an extra attack that you can reroll any number of dice with gives him that nested reroll that we've talked about, but also allows him to go after targets that maybe he wouldn't normally be able to kill.
Right, and the finisher trigger is so flexible because it doesn't have the restriction of targeting the same character either. So
right.
you can actually attack someone else completely different with those rerolls if you happen to be within range of a couple of people. Now, what's also great is that so when we talk about like war, like getting better, right, with larger dice pools.
Yeah.
So you're starting off with 7 dice base, let's say, right? And you need a hit and a wild to trigger this. So now with War, the Fury, you just need a wild to show up. And chances are you're going to get that trigger now, right?
Right.
So amazing.
Unless you roll one wild and
a bunch of skulls.
But
yeah.
It happens, but it's going to be really rare,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
it's like a 0.02% chance or something.
Right, and there are also games too where I've had where like Savage Predator will do no damage, but that finisher will do a ton of work.
Absolutely, the ability to reroll any number of dice during attack, and now with the evolution tokens having the nested reroll is great. Where he falls down for me in this particular list, he lacks action compression.
Right.
He does not have the self throw that the Savage Predator does, that Apex Sabertooth does. He doesn't have any way other than aggressive to be where he wants to be.
Again, well, 2 things. We can talk about the Weapon X card that actually does give him a pounce, a once per game pounce. Which can be, because he is a size 3, so when he pounces into somebody, that is 4 flat damage from that card coming at somebody, which is not bad. But 2, again, celestial technology.
Yeah, which is great, but does Apocalypse want to spend his power bringing that guy back in or not? Apocalypse, we've talked about, has really good ways to spend power. I think pulling in Sinister to line up a good beam 4 is a much better use than trying to reposition Sabertooth after Sabertooth got controlled by a Hulk or something. But remember,
celestial technology allows you to move 2 characters.
Right. But, I just think the use of that for your character, fixing a character who doesn't have their own mobility, who got put out of place, is a much worse use of that card to me, or that ability, that power put on that ability. I think one of the next 4 threat characters we're going to talk about pretty soon has some action compression and a similar damage output and can be War. So to me, he doesn't have the ability to do damage during the opponent's turn, but is a little bit more self-sufficient.
Right.
I don't want to have my 6-point character polishing a 4-point turd, right? Not that I think Sabertooth is a turd, but
okay.
You know what I'm saying? I don't want my 6-point character to have to compensate for another character. I want him to enhance these other characters.
Okay. All right. But I will say though, like I said, this guy definitely, to me, in theory, has the highest War Horseman token generation by far of any other character, and that should be something that people should think about.
Absolutely, and we didn't talk about it. The Pierce on his builder makes that doing at least 1 damage on his activation or during the clapback a much higher likelihood, right? 1 damage is a lot more easy to get out when you have that Pierce. Since that was so controversial, let's move to somebody who the whole internet agrees is amazing, right?
Okay, listen. I am a Blob proponent, okay? So in the sense of like, how many characters do you have that have, like Sabertooth, you have an out-of-activation attack, he has out-of-activation displacement, right? So whenever you try to attack him, he could potentially bounce you off and move you somewhere else. If that's your second action during the turn, I think you might be in a rough position sometimes when you're attacking Blob.
Blob to me is such a weird character. I understand what they were going for, and I think thematically they nailed this character.
Agreed.
I also think, the 6 hit points for a 3-point character, size 3, both detriment and advantage. I think he's a really cool, interesting character. I think this will actually be a very good place for him. I think he will use his displacement to get points for the team. Because again, we're going to be tall. We've got a 6-point leader. So getting those points is going to be really good. Again, he's got a terrain throw. That's something our leader lacks. So, getting some more of those out, even defensively throwing size 3 terrain away so that Apocalypse isn't eating it to the face is pretty good.
Yep.
He's got a medium-sized base, which means he can block some throw lanes coming at Apocalypse. My main problem with Blob in this faction is Famine and Pestilence. He wants to be on a point, so getting the Famine evolution token is going to be hard.
Correct. Correct. He does not put out conditions himself, which means that Pestilence is a rough sell.
I have stared at that character card for a very long time, looking for where he can put out conditions, and it doesn't exist.
No, most likely. So I actually just recently got to try him in an Apocalypse game with using Blob as Pestilence, and I found that there was a serious problem with the power generation, right? To be able to even pulse out the Pestilence superpower to begin with. Chances are to get the conditions, you have to use evolution tokens, so it's a wash most of the time. So, you're not really accelerating the token generation when you're using him as Pestilence, unfortunately. What he does do is that he typically is a guy that you are comfortable putting within 2 of a bunch of people because he's pretty hardy to begin with. And if they're attacking him, he'll reduce damage and push him out, which is pretty cool.
So unless there's 2 people there where he's going to be evolution token neutral, I don't think the Horsemen bring anything to him. I think, maybe the Famine using the place to get back in position because he is a small mover, is fine. Where I think this guy helps is gonna be Thunderous Splash.
Thunderous Splash is an incredible spender. It is terribly underrated. But again, we were talking about Explosive Force. One of the best triggers in the game on a 3-threat character from range 3.
Before damage is dealt, he gets to place within 1 of the target.
Yep.
Anybody within 2 of him, after he is placed, gets pushed and suffers 1 damage. Sizeless.
Sizeless, yes. And it gets around most push tech as well.
He cannot be pushed or thrown himself. So once he does that and he's on the point, he's on the point.
Yes.
So I think he could care less about the Horseman cards. I think he's a carrier of a Horseman card for Apocalypse. I don't think he wants to spend his power. Like I said, if he can get neutral or positive on the Pestilence power, he'll use it. I don't think he spends any power doing it himself. And I think instead he rerolls for the Explosive Force on his 7-die attack if he needs to. But more often than not, he gets the wild and he is just happy not doing any real damage, landing on a point, pushing everybody away, and saying this point belongs to the Blob.
Right. So in that case, let's run through the thought exercise of him as Famine then for a second. So in the beginning turns of the game, you can move Blob up to a point early, right? End of his activation, if he's one of the first people to move up to a point, chances no one's going to be on a point to, so he'll get the point. If they move within 2 of him, you can, if they don't get super close to you, any of your push techs, so your strike or the Thunderous Splash, like that could potentially like move people like out of the way, right? So that they're now outside of 3 for you to generate a token. So as the other Famine characters want to move themselves away from that, it's almost as if like he's taking the Famine thing to reposition himself, okay? He's like just within 2 of that person, drain their power, and then punch him a couple times to move him outside of range 3. And that's the way you can then generate the token that way. So I know it's a little more like, I don't know, convoluted, I guess is the word for it, but he can play it, but just in a very different route as a Famine character.
And I don't think he teleports with Famine to do that. I think he walks to exactly range 2 to make sure that you are exact, because you can't do the teleport and measure range 2 at the same time.
Right. That's a skill, like, you have to sort of eyeball that, you know?
My eyes are not that good. Okay. My experience is my opponent's eyes are also not that good, which is why everybody uses 2 tools at the same time, right? But because you can't measure it, I think he walks once.
Yeah.
And goes through the slot machine to get the wild push.
Okay.
The push is size 3 or less, so it will work on most characters. I don't think he wants to spend power because I think Thunder Splash is so good, and he's not a huge power building character, and his reactive power does cost a power, right?
Yeah, it does. You have to. I think you have to.
You have to suffer damage.
Suffer damage, yeah. So you have to spend before you take the damage, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, that's a little bit of anti-synergy, and it's too bad it doesn't work the other way. Yeah. But, I think he wants to hold on to some power at the end of his activation, and I think he's just going to hold on. If I can push the guy out with Famine, great. If not, I don't get an evolution token this turn.
Okay. I will say that it is just fun to have Blob be able to place 2, and then just have him do work sometimes.
He is a medium base, so that place 2 is a long ways.
It is a long way. It's almost as good as one of his movements, actually, right? Because the short tool and the range 2 tool, it's almost exactly the same.
It's about 1/8 of an inch less.
Yeah. But he's a very interesting choice. But yeah, he probably won't be your first choice for either of these Horseman cards. But I think you can do some interesting things with it that you couldn't do in the other affiliations he's in, right?
Yeah, and I definitely think he's worth a roster slot, even though, he's still not a great character. This faction doesn't do much for him. He does a little bit for the faction, and I think he's worth a roster slot, or at least thinking about a roster slot and doing some testing, even though I think he's one of the worst 3-point characters in the faction.
And that's still probably okay because he's still a pretty competent 3-threat.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh boy. Is this one of your favorites?
If you've ever read one of my lists, in almost every faction that I've played, Toad is in the list.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm alone with that.
No, I will admit also, like, he's the first 2-threat I always reach for as well.
He has a size 2 push on a range 3 attack. He's got slippery. He can interact from range 2. He can hop. He dies.
And he can also consolidate extracts.
Right. So, if you are playing Legacy Virus, and if you have Legacy Virus in your list and this guy isn't in your list, I'm going to ask you why.
Yeah.
And then I probably will say some things behind your back.
Right. Especially with mission objective, like rotating out, the Finder's Keeper stock just went up, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even cubes, potentially hammers, I'm still wondering why this guy isn't in your list. He's just a solid 2-threat. He does everything you want to do. For this faction, he's got an auto incinerate on his spender, which adds a little bit more. He's in faction. He should be a windmill slam in every list, I think. I think Apocalypse is an 8-point character, and it's Apocalypse and Toad. They happen to be on 2 different bases, but they're an 8-point character.
Right. There's a non-recurring grunt that you take with Apocalypse.
I just can't see why you wouldn't. He is so good. He is splashed in so many lists, for a reason, because he's a really good 2-threat character. And, I think he is what pushes Honey Badger down even further. He can be Death or Pestilence. Pestilence is fine.
It's fine, yeah.
He's got the auto condition. He doesn't really want to be within range 2, and his auto condition is on a range 2 attack. The auto condition is Incinerate, which is really good. But Pestilence is fine.
It's fine, but typically, yeah, he'll want to spend his power for the hops, the slipperies, right?
Right. He's really good at spending his power. I don't see why you would want to spend his power. So spending the evolution tokens is a little bit weird to me. However, he could be death.
Yes.
I would say my baseline for death is if you don't kill this character, I can potentially win the game.
Right.
I believe Toad embodies that, especially on games with multiple extracts that one person can hold. Toad grabs, some legacy virus and moves to the corner of the table.
Takes a hammer and then finders keepers another hammer. Oh boy.
Right. And like if you don't kill Toad, he wins. Right. So he embodies to me the death portion. He's not going to kill people, right? Like Toad's probably killed more people than a lot of other models, only out of sheer luck and the fact that he's been in a lot of lists. But he's not the death to kill people, where Psylocke's going in and she's trying to get multiple kills before she dies.
Right, and those are your two opposite end of the death spectrum, right? Like This is a character that's just going to be affordable and just is going to generate a ton of points, so you have to get rid of them. Or this is a character that will destroy everybody that you see in front of you if you don't take care of her.
I think if you have a good death in your roster, maybe he's not death. I think he wants to be death more often than Pestilence. I think Pestilence is fine. If you end within range 2 of him, he'll spit some acid at you and then walk away and hop away, and now he's halfway across the board, and he's applied a condition.
Yeah, and sometimes just walking, applying condition, leaving is also okay.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for the Pestilence superpower, if he has 2 power and he's safe, he doesn't need a hop. He can just walk up to somebody, do the superpower, and walk away and be perfectly happy. He does want to save power for slippery, not as much as the other people who want to save power, because if you don't do damage, then he doesn't really care about running away. That's right. So for me, this guy wants to be death, fine being Pestilence, windmill slam, put him in every list. Apocalypse is an 8-point character.
Okay. All right. Yeah. No, I can't disagree with that. It's definitely not a bad baseline to start with, right? At the end of the day,
I think he's the best character in the faction, which probably isn't saying that much because he's one of the most taken characters in the game. Wolverine.
Ooh. Yep. So he not too long ago got a buff. So like he's got a very good charge now. So again, when he charges, that next attack action after that charge, which can be any attack, his builder, his spender. If they ever print a card that gives him an alternate attack, that could be used as well, and he gets to count double when he hits a wild, right, for each.
I think this character looks at Sabertooth and says exactly what his charge says. He's the best at what he does. He's Death and War.
Yep.
Does great at both.
Yes.
Loves changing the wilds, or loves when he gets the wilds to do the extra damage. The healing factor with the large health pool makes him a good war. Death is kind of funny because he will be killing characters. He probably won't be dying as much as Psylocke.
If you put an extract on him, though, they probably have to do something about him.
Yeah. He's got the extra action compression in the Berserker Barrage, or the best at what I do. So he's got that mobility and the chase ability that we've been talking that's good in the faction. I think this guy is a really good character. I don't know that Death and War give him a ton of stuff that he really cares about other than adding the extra dice, which my experience is he does not generate enough power to want to do that instead of doing a Berserker Barrage, which gives him the place and the throw.
Right. It's really when he goes to the other side, right? Whereas he's taking damage, he's scaling more dice to his attacks, and that becomes more interesting math-wise, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, overall, I think this guy is really good for the faction. I think he's one of their best 4-threat character options.
Yep. I like the immunity to stun because like if the Mirror Fist that comes up, like that could be a potential like crisis that you might not feel as bad about, right?
Yeah, and we'll get into some crises next and talk about a sample list. But I think Mayor Fisk is maybe something because of Apocalypse's abilities on his card that you want to play, right?
Yeah.
Agreed. I want to heal my leader for standing on a point,
Yep.
incentivize my opponent to drop it, and he doesn't take anything, right? He takes the damage and heals the damage.
So in that case, like the opponent may actually place the Mirror Fist token well away, right, from Apocalypse.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's something interesting in our list, and I think Wolverine specifically helps that game plan, especially with the Mayor Fisk moving around and him from the Berserker Barrage getting the places. I think it's a great place for him to want to be at.
I would agree. Yeah. Is that the list?
That's the list. So that's everybody. That's all
okay.
17 characters. I would say that there's a lot of characters in there that I'm really excited to run with Apocalypse. My best honorable mentions in that are Toad because he's amazing. Psylocke, I think Psylocke is really good with him and gets a lot out of him. I think Sinister, it polishes him up. We talked about the turd polishing before. I think this does give him some of that. I think Beast is really interesting. I think Deadpool being a good character and being slotted in there is just awesome. What do you think? Who are you most excited to see in Apocalypse lists?
So for me, I think Sabertooth War is still my favorite. I know like Wolverine is probably a more consistent like stay around, but like I said, that ceiling is just so appealing to me that I think is just super interesting. I'm very excited for Mr. Sinister because I think he synergizes with Apocalypse's kit particularly well. Cassandra Nova is also like, again, a character that doesn't get to see play very often, but now, we can definitely see something new and inventive, I think, with the different options that she's going to have with the new Horseman cards. I'm also pretty excited about, I think Colossus actually also seeing some more play.
He's definitely going to see some play. There's been some buzz on the internet. AMG just finished a poll where Colossus won the poll for war.
Yeah.
So the internet is clearly really higher on Colossus than I am. But I think he's good. I don't think he's bad. I just think, Wolverine War, Sabertooth War, Psylocke War are going to make more use out of the abilities. But his staying power and, being at the center and standing on points and making it so if you want to win that point, you got to tackle a Colossus, may make him a very valuable war.
Yeah, and don't forget that we did talk about that. Apocalypse himself is very vulnerable to just being one-shotted sometimes by big dice pool attacks. So just having some sort of option, right, maybe to help like play around that or redirect that focus, could be the key to just keeping him around because he's such an important piece, right? At the end of the day.
Absolutely, absolutely, and him walking up to a big piece that doesn't have the movement that's going to make a large attack onto Apocalypse basically staggers them, right? Because now they have to walk away and then make the attack. So now that we've talked about them a little bit, why don't we go through each one of the four horsemen and talk about just a quick shout out to who we think maybe the best or the second best in each category is going to be.
Okay. I apologize because I may be repeating myself from the last section.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Because I think, like you talked about Sabertooth War, so who else do you think in War is going to be way up there?
Ooh, that's a good question. Okay, so yeah, Sabertooth and Wolverine I think are like the most obvious ones, and then Colossus. Those are the three that I would shout out to the most, just because either the raw dice math. So Wolverine benefits the most from the Fury power itself on his backside. Then Sabertooth, obviously, just the opportunities to get the evolution tokens. And then Colossus, he's like probably the best guy to just take soak damage and then just get it. So that's for War. What do you think of for War?
So I think Cable is really interesting because he's almost guaranteed to get the 1 damage a turn. he's got his own action compression in the place with the range 5 attack. So even if the board moves away from him, he's going to be able to get you that evolution token. Yep. So I think he's a really interesting shout out, and I think Deadpool is a really interesting shout out. It might not be what Deadpool wants as his number one, but he's going to be really good at it. Yeah. And he's going to be able to put out a bunch of damage. So, and weirdly soak attacks like he does.
Yeah, especially when he flips, and that spender at 7 dice based, and then you get the ability to modify, from I Know Karate and then also from the Fury rule itself, because he's going to have a ton of power when he flips.
Yeah, absolutely.
That'll be very scary.
So how about Pestilence?
Pestilence, hands down, Mr. Sinister. I'm so excited to see Mr. Sinister, as far as the ability, the person that's going to put out the most conditions, I think, consistently. I think Apocalypse is going to set him up for great spender beam opportunities to get the genetic sample tokens, because as long as he can get that engine going, he is oddly hard to kill, and putting out Root, it can really just debilitate certain characters. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Sinister as Pestilence is going to be amazing. It's going to feel real good. He's going to bring a lot to the table with that. And a secondary shout out to Cable. I know we just talked about him, but also he's a 5-threat character, so he should be good, right? And his Incinerate, like we talked about during Cable, is almost automatic, and so he'll be able to get 1 or 2 if he wants to spread his attacks around. But yeah, I'm just so excited to play Sinister.
Right.
My Sinister's been painted for a very long time, and he has seen very little table time.
Yeah, so we'll definitely see a lot more Sinister, I think, once the new box comes out. So what do you think about Famine?
Cassandra Nova.
Cassandra Nova? Yeah.
I have never played Cassandra Nova. I just bought her box at our last event. I am excited to get her on the table. I think Famine, that place, solves her. Yes. I think that small amount of action compression gives her everything she wanted, and she is going to make an amazing Famine. Her ability to move people, all of that stuff is going to add to this list, and that's where I'm putting all my cards on.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think any of the Famine characters that start with a range 4 attack, I think automatically shoots them up, just because they require no setup, right, to just generate that evolution token. So for me, Deadpool, I think he just brings such a well-rounded kit to him. He's a cheap character, and he's going to do a lot of work and still generate a consistent 1 token for you every turn.
Absolutely. He is going to be great, and I think we're going to see him not only in a lot of lists, but I think we're going to see him on the table a lot.
Yeah. So Death, would you say Toad is still your favorite?
He's Toad, man. Yeah. He's Toad. I don't think I could gush on this dude for long enough.
Yeah.
We don't have enough tape for me to talk about all the ways that Toad is awesome.
Right, we've already exhausted the Toad. Yeah, he's a great Death character. Opposite end, I would say, Psylocke to me is the other Death character. So I think, depending which side of the spectrum you want, right, you can't go wrong with either of these 2 characters.
So let's talk about building a sample list. So I've got a list built up, and we're gonna talk through some of the reasons why some of the characters were chosen, and maybe Jen will also throw out some alternates that I could have thought of, or that you out there could think of. So when I look at all the things we've already talked about, we don't have a steal. No. So I think high value extracts, gone. We don't want them. Right. That's a pillar that we can't meet.
Unless you want to splash, but you're diluting your Horseman abilities.
And I do think we do want to splash. I think that we don't cover every base, so it's going to be figuring out which splashes we want. I think maybe there's a maximum of 3 splash spots in a list, so that you can have a varying enough Horsemen in your list to get all the Horseman abilities that you want to get out on a regular basis. So the next pillar that I don't think the Servants of Apocalypse are good at is 15-threat researcher.
I super agree, actually.
This has been something that's been forced by some teams that are really good at it. And I just don't think Apocalypse can compete at that. So that also means that I think we just don't want a 15-point card in our lists.
Right. I think the most interesting list building starts at 16 for Apocalypse, right? And so anything with a 15 threat, I think I personally would just eliminate right off the bat.
Yeah, and we don't want to get forced into 15 threat researcher, right?
Right,
Like we're not
yeah.
going to choose the opponent's extracts when they have researcher and we have priority, but also if they have priority and they choose extracts and get their researcher and our gamma or our sword, then we're at 15 on researcher, and I just don't think we want that.
Yeah,
I do not think we want to be super wide. Yeah, we have 2 affiliated 2-threat models and a handful of 3 threats, but I think our 4 threats and 5 threats are interesting enough that we don't want to do the 6-7 wide plan.
Correct. Yeah. I see this team typically being 4 to 5 wide, personally.
I believe that 3 wide is probably not the way we want to go.
Correct.
And I don't think 6+ wide is. I think 4 and 5 is the wheelhouse. Instead of adding more characters, I think upgrading our 3 threats to our solid 4 threats is a better game plan. Or upgrading our 4 threats to our solid 5 threats, right? We have 2 very good 5 threats that synergize well with our team. We have 3, 4, 5, 4 threats that synergize well with our team. That's where we want to stay.
Yeah.
And, we just talked about this. We don't want to be super tall.
Yeah.
I don't think Apocalypse, Cable, Wolverine is going to be a thing. That's 15 points. I don't see that being a good list.
I feel like, just having 2 Horseman cards feels really bad.
Yeah, he gets more. I think the minimum amount of Horsemen you want is 3. Maybe there will be a splash reason for you to take 2, but I think we want 3.
Yeah.
Pay to flips, we have really good ways to spend power.
Yes.
We have lots of ways to spend power to better our game plan. I don't think we want to play pay to flips.
Nope.
I think we're fine if they come up, right?
Yeah.
Like if our opponent has a pay to flip and we get into it, I don't think it's an automatic loss for us, but I do believe it's an uphill battle.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Throwing people. We've got a couple of spenders and stuff that throw. Wolverine spender, Apocalypse's builder.
Yep.
We've got 1 character that throws people.
Right, and that's Beast. I mean, he's really good at it.
He's really good at it. It's lower end people. We have other movements. We've talked about them. Cassandra Nova can walk people off. Sinister can walk people off.
Yeah.
We do have that control, but we don't have ways to throw people. So I think it's a deficit and it's a pillar that we are missing inside of our list.
Yes, and we also have very specific characters that also can throw only terrain as well.
Right.
So we may be vulnerable to, let's say, a Magneto situation where if they're lobbing a bunch of terrain at us, maybe we don't have enough people to throw the terrain back or just get rid of stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think in the Magneto type list, we are going to want somebody like Blob who's going to take a size 3 and throw it into a size 2.
Yes, I would agree with that.
I will give Magneto the power so that Apocalypse doesn't need it to the face, because as we talked about, his healing only works on attacks, so he's really susceptible to throws.
Right, we want to try to mitigate as much collision damage coming to Apocalypse as possible, right?
Right.
So yeah, anytime you're just you throw a size 2, that's a 4 damage and a 3 damage, something that's now off the board, right? And I think that's worth it a lot of the times.
All right, so what are we good at?
Okay, what are we good at?
I think we're good at winning fair fights.
Okay, yep.
I think all of our characters have decent attacks. I think the evolution tokens put us to the point with the rerolls where we're going to be able to eke out a little bit more damage, take a little bit less damage, and it's going to balance it in our favor. I think we're good at playing scenarios with conditions.
Yep.
I think Demons Downtown, Mayor Fisk, probably really good things to start with. We might go away from them. I don't know. We'll have to see where it lands and how we play them. But in theory, that's going to be good for us.
Right.
We're weirdly good at movement and chasing.
Right.
There are a bunch of characters who have the action compression to get out there and chase people. I think we're good at flexibility. I think we can modify to all the different game plans. The Horseman cards give us a bunch of different powers. We can shift those powers because every character can be 2 Horsemen.
Yep.
So I think that flexibility, as well as some good, well-rounded 3 threats and 4 threats, we can fit in almost any game plan. And playing in faction, because the Horseman cards add a lot, and the evolution tokens can only be spent on faction models.
Yeah.
So I think we're really good at playing in faction.
Yeah. So from a plus narrative perspective for those players, like I think that might be a pull sometimes, right? That's like, hey, you are really encouraged to stay in this faction, right, for your roster.
Which is awesome. I love it. I love that kind of game design. I'm a little bit more of a fluffy player when it comes to that kind of stuff. That's how I play. So I'm happy to have a faction that does that.
Right. You're rewarded for doing this, so right?
Right.
Yeah.
So what bases do we need to cover? So like we talked about, we don't have people throws. There is no healing or condition removal.
Right. Apocalypse himself has interesting ways to get healing, I think.
Right.
There are some healing factor characters, but right, condition removal is actually might be an issue, right?
Right. We don't have a Wong style character who's going to put out heals, or a Hood style character who's putting out heals. We don't have anybody that's pulling conditions off people. There's not that many in the game.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But stagger is going to be an issue on Apocalypse.
Until he flips.
Yeah. Apocalypse frontside, stagger is going to be a problem. So that's something that we want to look at. We don't have ways to really add dice other than the Horseman powers. That's only 1 Horseman power that adds dice. There are a couple of characters who have a little bit of self-adding dice, but we don't have, the Thanos Death Decree. We don't have the Mordo.
Right.
It's not Barbs. It's his other ability that adds dice.
Yeah.
We don't have a true bodyguard.
Right.
So, looking at a Heroes for Hire or a Steve might be something worthwhile.
Yep.
Like we said, Apocalypse being really hurt by a stagger on his front side, it might be worthwhile to bodyguard some of that attacks. We do have Colossus and we do have Honey Badger who can taunt attacks. Characters with action compression can get around that. We don't have an extract steal.
Yep.
Sad times.
It is. Yeah. You can pump out like specific damage to people to make some people drop stuff, but that's really about it. Yeah. There's nothing that Miles Morales or Black Cat like function, right? So.
Absolutely. And we don't have a safe grab.
Well, I mean, your favorite death model, actually can I think actually have reasonable safe grab opportunities. Granted, it's not the safe grab, but it's like safe grab asterisks. So here's my thinking, okay? So evolution tokens like give you a source of rerolls. So running Toad and Web Warriors, I have rerolls, successful defense rolls sometimes if that's gonna generate him 2 power to get the slippery. So it gives you, the evolution tokens is the thing that gives you a lot more agency, right? In your character decision making. So there'll be a lot of times where I think Toad can grab something midline and if as long as you have 1 evolution token, I think he's gonna be fine to try to like slippery away after he gets attacked once. So just my 2 cents there on that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, it's a safe-ish grab.
Safe-ish, asterisks, yeah.
So scenarios. So we don't want any of our 15 threat scenarios. We don't want to be forced into researcher. We don't want to take pay to flips. So what are we looking at? I think Mayor Fisk is a good call out. I think we've got some stuff that's immune to stun. I think putting conditions on the opponent's models is good for us.
Yep.
D shapes. I think we're probably fine at D shapes.
Yeah, I think it's not the worst thing because like your faction can still go relatively like wider. Not like six models wide, but you can run 5 models on a D shape and be okay in Apocalypse, I think.
Absolutely. Infinity formula, we have that action compression and move back and forth. We do good things with power. Almost every character in this list can spend 10 power a turn.
Absolutely.
So I think Infinity formula is pretty good. I think Apocalypse can hold down a side, or maybe Apocalypse and Toad can hold down a side while the rest of the team works on the other side. Once the rest of the team gets stuff done, he can teleport them in with your favorite ability and bring it to bear on the rest of the team. So I think that one's going to be good for us. What do you think about intrusions?
I think depending on the horseman that you take, you can certainly take a team that it actually is very specialized in close range like engagements. Apoc himself is very okay with it. I think like any of the war models like are very happy to be in the scrum. Deadpool I think is okay to be in the scrum. Beast is okay as well. You know, you can just teleport, just throw someone off a point. Cable, super okay, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think intrusions is definitely one of their strongest because you can take a very brawly list and not lose any of the horseman efficiency.
I agree. Scoundrels, we can be sort of wide. We've got a bunch of people with range attacks. We don't have ways to ignore cover. We've got the movement, so we can remove cover with the movement. But there are some scenario teams where I think we just automatically lose at it, right?
Yeah, I think what it is like scoundrels would be one of those things where you're not unhappy to see it come up, but it's not going to be something you want to run innately, right? Because 5 points of scoring, you know, to certain teams can be very detrimental, especially if they want to like have high extracts and then you get your high scoring secure. It could be, you know, a rough time for Apocalypse.
Absolutely, and I think we've got a couple of different ways to walk people off of points, but it would end up being a match of who can displace who.
Yeah.
At the end of the turn.
Yeah.
And because we're probably running 4 to 5 wide, we're probably going to be lower, so they're going to get the reaction to that every turn.
Yeah. It would be up to you to try to make sure that you take enough models by dazing or KOing them, and then make sure you get the last activation that way. So D shapes are kind of and so is scoundrels. Scoundrels is probably less bad since there is a midpoint. That's a place you can put like a large model like Apocalypse and he'll be okay sort of affecting the board like that way. And he can sort of like shift around to like different areas of that center point, right? And still be within range 3 to attack people, which is interesting.
And you're going to have Famine, so he'll be able to teleport to the other side of that without a problem.
Yeah, so I think we've already identified that Mayor Fist is probably going to be a secure they want. I think Infinity Format is correctly, one that you want because of the power generation. Do you have a third one in mind?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about demons a little bit when we went through the initial discussions. Apocalypse being immune to incinerate on both sides, really good. So it's basically a scenario that reads heal Apocalypse 1 in the power phase, right?
Yep.
Or give Apocalypse an extra power in the power phase. Oddly, interaction, demons downtown happens on turn 1. If Apocalypse deploys directly in the center of the board, because he's got the large base, he gets 2 power turn 1 on demons downtown.
Yes.
Which means he can teleport forward with Famine without having to use any of the evolution tokens.
Ooh, yeah. And that can allow you to like hit someone twice on the midpoint. Like
Absolutely. So it's going to be interesting. I think that scenario is at least worth considering. It might be better off going with one of the Ds strictly because I think when we're interacting with Extremis consoles to heal with the amount of healing factor plus, our evolution tokens and our staying power, right? The people who don't have healing factor, we've got some characters who take who have good staying power. I think we don't bring like the Magics or the Gambits on those.
Right.
But I think our characters who do have the staying power, we're actually weirdly good at Extremis. But I don't think D is a shape we want to lean into to start.
No. I think there is play in basically all the secures, but there are certain ones I think you're more willing to take as part of your 3 versus the others.
Yeah, so I think for a first iteration, we take Mayor Fisk, Infinity, and Demons Downtown.
Yeah, I think that's good.
I think that's a solid starting point. Demons, we might not be as good at fighting as the other fighting teams, so we'll just have to see.
Yeah.
Extracts. So I don't think we want researcher, senators, or paranoia.
Okay. Yep.
I think the high value extracts in senators and paranoia that are scoring 6 a turn, because we don't have a steal, we don't have great safe grabs, and I just don't think we want to see that stuff. And like I said, researcher at 15, we get forced into it, it's going to be a really bad day.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, I would agree then. The senators is just too many extract points, so we don't have enough bodies to cover it. And yeah, paranoia, like as soon as let's say you go 2 and 2, like 2 extracts and 2 extracts, as soon as one person drops one of your extras on your side, it's going to be a really bad time, So you can hold one with Apocalypse obviously, but the next person, like, even Colossus can go down, right, with a Vengeful Fire, or they get stolen off of, and it feels really bad to try to catch them like afterwards.
Absolutely. So I think one of the ones, it's been one of my recent favorites, and I think we're pretty good at it, is Skrulls. We've got decent physical defense. We've got a multitude of characters who can grab the one on our side safely.
Yep.
We've got a multitude of characters who are fine going and grabbing the one on our opponent's side and just standing there hanging out. So I think that's something that we're probably pretty good at. So that's one that I think we should definitely try in the list. What do you think about cubes? So we had talked about the Toad vacuum, but is that something that we want to lean into, do you think?
So unfortunately, I would say no, just because like there's no innate healing, right, in this faction. So Hellfire Toad is a different beast altogether because he can regenerate health, and that can let him, pay for the damage or recover the damage that he would have taken. But in this case, it is stackable, which is the nice thing. I think if anyone, it's going to be Apocalypse that's going to be like taking the cubes, and you can spend the power like pretty easily. But it does also make him more vulnerable, right? Because then your leader is also an extra pinata,
right?
And that makes him doubly like enticing to try to just go into, and he can be focus fire down. Certainly there are builds like bodyguards, taunters that you can take, right, to help mitigate that, but it is riskier. Again, I think you can play it, but wouldn't be something you want to take, right, innately.
Absolutely, I agree. Legacy Virus, I think if you have Toad as part of your main game plan, it's just a solid scenario to choose.
Yes.
So I think Legacy Virus is probably as close to a windmill slam as we get in all of the scenarios to start.
Yep.
Because Toad is a major point of our game plan.
Yeah. And does he have to be KO'd by by an enemy effect to get the 3 evolution tokens?
No.
Oh, so yeah.
No, so you blow up Toad and you get
6 points and 3 evolution tokens.
Right. So, even better, he is like triply good on that scenario. And again, I think with the removal of Eyes on the Prize, less people are taking something that wants to do a first turn midline grab on something like Legacy Virus, where they're going to come back and keep it safe. ASM is really not interested in grabbing one and moving back with a 1 VP extract in a 3 VP scenario.
Right.
Namor probably also not as interested in that. It sets up his charge for turn 2, but that's a 5-point character who's not doing anything round 1. Midnight Suns have some good options. In a Bill Midnight Suns match is always good. There are certainly ways that people can still do it, but because it's not as prevalent as it was before, I think daring our opponent to walk people and stand there is going to be interesting for us when we have Apocalypse who's ready to go.
Right. Your Famine character or any characters with like long range attacks, yeah, like you can definitely interact with more people on the midlight now. So yeah, I think Legacy is close to a slam dunk. You're right. I also agree. Yeah, Skrulls. Part of it is just like I just think like this team just wants high threat like crises, right? So
absolutely.
So 20 threat crisis, but there's 4, and both Fear Grips and Skrulls I think are great candidates. In addition to Legacy Virus, to be like these are 4 points, so you'll be on parity, and they're high threat, so you'll be able to take 4 Horsemen typically in those games.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think something like Montesi is probably pretty neutral for us.
Oh yeah, Montesi's probably all right actually.
You know, if we get it when we don't have priority and they steal the center one, it'll put us at a 2-1 disadvantage with very little ways to get that back. So I think it's fine, but we don't want to take it. Alien ship, I think, is weird because we have a bunch of characters who want to build power, and who want to keep that power and spend it in the next turn. So blowing up from that power isn't great for us.
Though I will say that because of the additional superpower that you have, they have more ways to spend their power, right?
True.
So you can really ride that line of just keeping them at that 2 power so they never have to take a test with them. I don't think Alien Ship is actually that bad, and it also puts people like midline interaction, just like Legacy Virus, right?
Yep.
So that you have opportunities to make those attacks and interact with them. So,
Yeah, so I think it's probably fine. Spider Infected, I don't think we want any part of.
No.
While our models do have good action compression, they don't want to spend it just getting back to where they were. They want to spend it pushing forward, I think.
Yeah. And you have various characters that want to be at ideal ranges, and having something that can just randomly move you out of the place, it's going to feel really rough, you know?
Yeah, so I think we'll probably start with Fear Grips, Legacy, and Scrolls with an honorable mention to Alien Ship and Montesi.
Yeah. So yeah, Shane, we've done an exhaustive overview of Apocalypse and the Horseman cards. So how do you want to conclude this?
I don't know. My brain is about mush at this point in time. I think there's so much here to think about. It's going to take a lot of different iterations of getting this stuff onto the field in order to get an understanding of what's going on here.
I agree.
There's a real lot, and it's exciting options, and I am excited to get out there and learn this faction.
I agree. There's a lot to explore, and I'm happy that we have a new faction to really sink our teeth in and really just check out all these options, characters that maybe will get revitalized in this new look. So yeah, if there's nothing else to say, guys, thank you for sticking with us. Please like and subscribe to RSMP Tabletop if you love this content. We always appreciate any comments in the comment section. Let us know what you think. This has been a long day for me and Shane. We hope you've learned something. We hope you got some fun insights and some good banter out of this. So yeah, we'll see you in the next video that we do. Take care.